The late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty lace curtains of the living room, casting long golden stripes across the worn carpet. The house was quiet. It was the kind of silence that settles into a home after years of solitude, a silence that had become Eleanor's closest companion since her husband, Robert, passed away 5 years ago. Eleanor sat in her favourite armchair, the one with the velvet upholstery that had faded from emerald green to a soft, mossy colour. On her lap lay a cloud of white fabric. It was delicate, intricate, and older than the woman holding it. The family heirloom veil. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. In her right hand, she held a needle, the silver tip glinting in the sun. In her left, she pinched a small tear in the lace, a tiny wound in the fabric that needed healing. Just one more stitch, she whispered to herself. Her voice was raspy, unused to speaking aloud. She moved the needle toward the fabric, but her hand refused to obey. It started with a subtle vibration in her thumb, then spread to her wrist. The tremor. It was the intruder that had moved into her body a year ago. An uninvited guest named Parkinson's. It wasn't severe yet, not enough to stop her from living alone, but enough to steal the precision that had defined her life as a seamstress. The needle hovered, dancing erratically in the air, missing the target by an inch. Eleanor bit her lip. She closed her eyes, visualizing her hand as a stone, heavy and still. She exhaled slowly. She tried again. This time, the needle found its mark. She pulled the thread through. A small victory. She smiled, a soft expression that crinkled the corners of her eyes. This veil was her gift. It was the same veil she had worn 40 years ago. The same one Mark's grandmother had worn before that. Tonight, she would give it to Jessica. Mark. Her boy. The thought of him warmed the room more than the sunlight. He was bringing his fiancé over for dinner to discuss the wedding plans. It was the first time they would be sitting down for a proper meal since the engagement party, which had been too loud and too crowded for Eleanor to really speak to them. She carefully folded the veil, wrapping it in acid-free tissue paper before placing it into a sturdy white box. She tied it with a satin ribbon. Her fingers fumbled with the bow, requiring 3 attempts to get the loops even. When it was done, she patted the box gently. It wasn't just old lace. It was a blessing. It was her way of being part of their future. Eleanor stood up, her knees popping slightly. She walked to the kitchen, her slippers shuffling softly on the hardwood floor. The smell of pot roast filled the air. It was Mark's favourite, slow-cooked beef with carrots and potatoes, rich and savoury. She had started it at dawn. She checked the time on the oven clock. 5:45 p.m. They would be here in 15 minutes. Panic, cold and sudden, pricked at her chest. Was the house clean enough? Jessica was particular. Eleanor grabbed a cloth and wiped a speck of dust from the dining table. She adjusted the centerpiece, a modest arrangement of hydrangeas from her garden. She looked at her hands. They were dry, the skin thin like paper. She quickly applied some lotion, trying to rub away the evidence of age and frailty. The sound of a car engine cut through the quiet. Tires crunched on the gravel driveway. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. She smoothed her skirt, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door. She wanted to look capable. She wanted to look like a mother who could still take care of things, not a burden waiting to happen. The door swung open before she could reach it. Mark stood there, filling the frame. He looked tired, his broad shoulders slightly slumped in his expensive grey suit, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Mum," he said, stepping in and wrapping her in a bear hug. He smelled of rain and expensive cologne. "Mark," she breathed into his shoulder, "you're here." Behind him, Clicking her tongue softly, stood Jessica. If Eleanor was a faded watercolour painting, Jessica was a high-definition photograph. She was stunning, with sleek blonde hair that fell in a perfect curtain around her face and makeup that highlighted her sharp, symmetrical features. She wore a beige trench coat over a white dress that looked like it cost more than Eleanor's car. She was holding a smartphone, her thumb scrolling rapidly across the screen, even as she stepped into the house. "Hello, Eleanor," Jessica said, looking up from her phone for a brief second. Her smile was tight, not reaching her eyes. "It smells heavy in here. What is that?" "It's pot roast," Eleanor said, pulling away from Mark to greet her future daughter-in-law. She extended a hand, Mark's favourite. Jessica looked at Eleanor's outstretched hand, noticing the slight tremor. She didn't take it. Instead, she made a show of unbuttoning her coat. "Oh, right, beef. I'm actually trying to stay plant-based before the wedding. Skincare, you know. But I'm sure Mark will love it." Mark laughed nervously. "I definitely will. Come on, Jess, come in. Mum, the place looks great." Eleanor lowered her hand, tucking it into her pocket. "Thank you. Come, sit. Dinner is almost ready." The dinner table felt too large for the three of them. The silence that Eleanor was used to had been replaced by a different kind of quiet, a tense, pressurized silence. Mark ate with gusto, praising the roast with every bite, trying to fill the void. Jessica picked at a roasted potato, dissecting it as if looking for flaws. "So," Mark said, wiping his mouth with a napkin, "we have some updates on the venue, the Grand Plaza Hotel. The ballroom is massive." "That sounds expensive," Eleanor said softly. She didn't mean to criticize, it was just a reflex. She had raised Mark on a budget, teaching him the value of every dollar. Jessica's fork clattered onto her plate. She looked at Eleanor with a cool, unblinking stare. "It's not expensive, Eleanor. It's exclusive. There's a difference. We want this wedding to be an experience, not just a party." "Of course," Eleanor said quickly. "I just want you to be happy." "We are happy," Jessica said, her tone implying that Eleanor's question suggested otherwise. "We are very happy. It's going to be the event of the year. My followers are already asking for sneak peeks." Mark reached out and covered Jessica's hand. "It's going to be beautiful. And Mum, we were thinking about the guest list. We need to finalize your side of the family." Eleanor nodded. "Oh, well, there aren't many left. Just Aunt Clara and the cousins from Ohio. Maybe 10 people." Jessica raised an eyebrow. 10? That's manageable. We have a strict aesthetic for the head tables, so we might seat them in the back tier. Better lighting for the photos near the front, you understand. Eleanor didn't understand why lighting would affect where her sister sat, but she nodded. "Whatever is best for you." Mark cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "Mum, didn't you say you had something for us?" Eleanor's eyes brightened. "Yes, I do." She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Her legs felt a bit wobbly, but excitement propelled her. She went to the sideboard and retrieved the white box. She carried it back to the table like it was made of glass. "I've been working on this for weeks," Eleanor said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. She placed the box in front of Jessica. Jessica looked at the box, then at Mark, then back at the box. She didn't reach for it. "Open it," Mark urged, smiling. Jessica lifted the lid. She pulled back the tissue paper. There, resting on the white cushion, was the vintage lace veil. It was a cathedral-length veil, the edges hand-embroidered with tiny silk flowers. It was slightly ivory with age, contrasting with the stark white of the tissue paper. "Oh," Jessica said. It wasn't a gasp of delight. It was the sound of someone finding a dead bug in their salad. "It was mine," Eleanor explained, her hands clasping together to hide their shaking. "And Mark's grandmother's. I cleaned it and repaired the lace myself. I thought it would be your something old. Mark stood up and looked at it. Wow, Mom. I remember seeing photos of you in this. It's amazing. He looked at Jessica, expecting her to be touched. Jessica lifted a corner of the fabric with 2 fingers. She wrinkled her nose slightly. It's certainly vintage. It's Belgian lace, Eleanor added, hope fading from her voice. Jessica dropped the fabric back into the box. She looked at Eleanor with a pitying smile that felt like a slap. Eleanor, that is so sweet. Really, but I already have my veil. It's custom Vera Wang to match my dress. It's sheer silk. This is a bit heavy, isn't it? And the colour, it's yellow. It's ivory, Eleanor whispered. It's yellow, Jessica corrected firmly. It would clash with my dress. I'd look like I haven't washed. But thank you, it's a nice thought. Mark looked between the 2 women. He saw his mother's crestfallen face, and he saw his fiancé's determination. He compromised. He always compromised. Maybe you can wear it for the rehearsal dinner, Mark suggested, or we can display it on a table at the reception as a tribute. Jessica sighed. A small, sharp sound. Mark, honey, we talked about the theme. It's modern ethereal. This is rustic antique. It just doesn't fit the brand. The brand? Eleanor asked. It's a wedding, not a business. The room went deadly silent. Jessica's eyes narrowed. She turned to Mark. I'm going to use the restroom. She stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. Her heels clicked loudly down the hallway. Mark ran a hand through his hair. Mom, you have to understand. Jessica is under a lot of pressure. She has sponsors for the wedding. People are watching. I just wanted to give her something from the family, Mark. Something real. I know, Mum. I know. Mark stood up and walked over to her. He kissed her forehead. I'll talk to her. Don't worry. The roast was delicious, by the way. He followed Jessica down the hall. Eleanor sat alone at the table. The box was open. The veil looked lonely in the harsh light of the chandelier. She reached out and touched the lace again. It didn't feel yellow or heavy to her. It felt like love. It felt like continuity. She heard muffled voices from the hallway. She knew she shouldn't listen, but she couldn't help it. The house was old, and sound travelled through the vents. Smells like a thrift store, Mark, Jessica's voice hissed. It's important to her, Jess. She spent weeks fixing it, Mark's voice was pleading. She ruined it. Look at the stitching on the side. It's uneven. It's crooked. It looks like a child did it. Eleanor looked down at her hands. They were trembling violently now. She has a condition, Jess. You know that. Then she shouldn't be sewing, Jessica snapped. God, Mark, are we going to have to deal with this at the wedding? Is she going to spill wine on my dress because she can't hold a glass? She's becoming a liability. Stop it, Mark said, but his voice lacked conviction. She's my mother. Exactly, and I'm your future wife. You need to decide whose vision matters more. This is my day, not hers. I don't want that dusty rag anywhere near me. The voices lowered as they moved further away, perhaps into the bathroom or the guest room. Eleanor sat frozen. The words liability and dusty rag echoed in her mind. She looked at the stitching she had done earlier. Jessica was right. It wasn't perfect. If she squinted, she could see where the thread was slightly tighter in some places, where her hand had jerked. A tear leaked out of her eye and splashed onto the table. She quickly wiped it away. She wouldn't cry. Not now. She closed the box. She tied the ribbon again, her fingers fumbling worse than before. She pushed the box to the side of the table, out of sight. When Mark and Jessica returned 10 minutes later, Eleanor was in the kitchen, washing dishes. She had her back to them. The water was running loud and hot, steam rising up to her face. Mom, Mark called out from the doorway. Eleanor turned off the tap. She dried her hands on a towel, keeping her back straight. She turned around with a practiced smile. It was the smile she used when her husband was sick, the smile that said everything is fine. "I'm just clearing up," she said. Her voice was steady. Jessica was checking her makeup in a compact mirror. She snapped it shut. "We should get going, Mark. I have a live stream at 8. "Right," Mark said. He looked at Eleanor with guilt in his eyes. He knew she had heard something, or maybe he just hoped she hadn't. "Thanks for dinner, Mum." "You're welcome." They moved to the door. Eleanor followed them. As Jessica passed her, she stopped. She leaned in close, bringing with her a scent of expensive perfume that masked the smell of the pot roast. "Eleanor," Jessica said, her voice dropping to a whisper that Mark couldn't hear from the driveway. "Next time, please don't ambush me with gifts. It's really awkward. I hate saying no to old people. It makes me look bad." She patted Eleanor on the arm, a patronizing, dismissive pat. Then she flashed a dazzling smile and walked out the door. "Bye, Mom. Love you," Mark called from the car. "Drive safe," Eleanor waved. She watched the red taillights of Mark's car fade into the darkness. The silence rushed back into the house, heavier than before. Eleanor locked the door. She walked back to the dining room. The table was empty, except for the white box pushed to the side. She sat down in the chair Mark had occupied. She could still feel the warmth of his body on the seat. She looked at the box. Liability. She looked at her hands. They were shaking rhythmically, a constant, uncontrollable reminder of her failing body. She grabbed the box and walked to the hallway closet. She reached up to the highest shelf, the one where she kept things that were no longer needed. Old winter coats, broken umbrellas, empty picture frames. She shoved the box into the back corner behind a stack of old towels. "I won't be a burden," she whispered to the darkness. "I promise." She went back to the kitchen to finish the dishes. She washed every plate twice, just to make sure they were perfect. But as she scrubbed, she couldn't wash away the feeling that the crack in her heart was much harder to mend than the tear in the lace. This was only the beginning. She didn't know it yet, but the line had been drawn. The veil was the first casualty. Her dignity would be the next target. Eleanor turned off the lights, leaving the kitchen in shadows. Upstairs, in the guest bedroom, a small red light blinked in the corner of the ceiling. It was the motion sensor of the nanny cam Mark had installed six months ago, after she had slipped on the stairs. He had set it up out of love, to keep her safe. It was recording. It had seen the dinner. It had heard the voices. It was watching, silent and objective, waiting for the truth to unfold. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of pastel colours and sharp demands. For Eleanor, time seemed to move differently than it did for everyone else. For the young couple, it was a race against the clock, a frantic sprint toward a finish line made of flowers and champagne. For Eleanor, time was a slow, sticky substance. It was filled with long hours of waiting by the phone, waiting to be included, waiting to be useful. She tried to help. God knows she tried. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, Eleanor drove to Mark and Jessica's sleek downtown apartment. Mark had called her, sounding desperate. They were assembling the wedding favours, 500 small, intricate boxes containing artisanal truffles. They were behind schedule, and the wedding planner charged extra for assembly. "We need hands, Mum," Mark had said. "Can you come?" Eleanor had arrived with a Tupperware container of homemade cookies and a heart full of hope. She sat at their glass dining table, surrounded by piles of gold ribbon and cardstock. Jessica was there, pacing back and forth with a clipboard, dictating the workflow. "It's simple, Eleanor," Jessica said, speaking slowly as if addressing a child. "Fold the box. Insert the truffle, close the lid, tie the ribbon in a perfect square knot. The loops must be exactly 2 centimetres, not 3, not 1, 2. Eleanor nodded. She reached for a ribbon. Her medication was wearing off, and the familiar tremor was humming in her right hand. She focused. She willed her fingers to cooperate. She folded the box successfully. She placed the chocolate inside, but the ribbon. The silk ribbon was slippery. Her fingers danced around it, failing to catch the loop. She tried once, twice. The knot came out lopsided. "Stop!" Jessica barked. Eleanor jumped. The box fell from her hand, the expensive truffle rolling onto the floor. Jessica sighed. A long, exaggerated exhalation of air. She walked over, picked up the truffle, and threw it in the trash. "That's waste, Eleanor. We can't serve floor chocolate to VIP guests." "I'm sorry," Eleanor stammered. "My hands are just a little stiff today." "It's not stiffness," Jessica said coldly. "It's inefficiency. You've done 3 boxes in 20 minutes. Mark and I have done 50. Mark looked up from his pile. "Jess, give her a break. She's trying." "Trying doesn't get things done, Mark. We are on a deadline." Jessica turned to Eleanor. "Maybe you should just sit this out. You can break down the cardboard boxes for recycling. That doesn't require fine motor skills." So, for the next 3 hours, Eleanor sat on the floor in the hallway, flattening cardboard boxes, while laughter and music drifted from the dining room. She felt like a servant in her son's life, banished to the scullery. She didn't complain. She flattened every box until her back ached, hoping that this small act of service would earn her a place in their world. But the real blow came a week later. It was the day of the final dress fitting. The bridal salon was a palace of mirrors and white velvet. It was located in the most expensive district of the city, a place where the air conditioning smelled like lavender and money. Eleanor felt out of place the moment she stepped onto the plush carpet in her orthopedic shoes and department store raincoat. Mark had insisted she come. "It's a tradition, Mum. The mother of the groom should see the dress." Jessica had agreed, but with a caveat. "She can come, but she needs to stay in the background. The photographer is coming to document the say yes to the dress moment for my social media. I don't want distractions in the frame." Eleanor stood in the corner of the fitting suite, clutching her handbag. The room was crowded. There was Jessica's mother, a loud woman named Linda, who wore too much jewellery and drank champagne at 10 o'clock a.m. There were 3 bridesmaids, all tall and blonde, looking like clones of Jessica. And there was the photographer, a young man snapping photos every time Jessica flipped her hair. Then Jessica stepped out of the changing room. The dress was undeniably beautiful. It was a mermaid silhouette, tight and structured, exploding into a cascade of tulle at the bottom. It was modern, architectural, and cold. "Oh my God!" Linda shrieked, clapping her hands. "You look like a queen." The bridesmaids cooed in unison. The photographer flashed away. Jessica preened in front of the trifold mirror. She turned left, then right, admiring her reflection. She ignored Eleanor completely. Mark was sitting on a velvet sofa, looking awestruck. "You look amazing, Jess." Jessica frowned at her reflection. She twisted her body, looking at the back of the bodice. "Wait, something is wrong." The room went silent. "What is it?" the store attendant asked nervously. "This strap," Jessica pointed to the delicate lace strap on her left shoulder. "It's loose. It's gaping. Look, when I move my arm, it lifts up. It ruins the line of the neck." The attendant rushed over. "Let me see. Ah, yes. It seems the fabric has stretched slightly. We can fix that. I need it fixed now, Jessica demanded. I have a photo shoot in an hour at the venue. I can't wear it like this. I'm sorry, Mum, the attendant said, checking her watch. Our head seamstress is at lunch. She won't be back for 45 minutes. I don't have 45 minutes. Jessica's voice rose an octave. This is unacceptable. I'm paying $10,000 for this dress. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on Eleanor in the corner. A slow, calculating smile spread across Jessica's face. It was the smile of a predator spotting a wounded animal. Wait, Jessica said, turning to Mark. Your mom, she's a seamstress, isn't she? Mark looked up, surprised. Yeah, she was the best in town. Jessica turned to Eleanor, her voice dripping with sudden sweetness. Eleanor, could you fix it? It's just a tiny tuck. A couple of stitches. You can do that, right? Eleanor froze. Every eye in the room turned to her. She felt the blood drain from her face. I don't have my glasses, Eleanor lied weakly. She did have them. They were in her bag, but she knew her hands. Today was a bad day. The stress of the environment was making her tremor worse. Her left hand was currently vibrating against the side of her leg. Oh, don't be silly, Linda chimed in. You've been sewing for 50 years. You could do it blindfolded. Mom, please, Mark said, standing up. It would really save the day. Jess is stressing out. Eleanor looked at Mark. She saw the desperation in his eyes. He just wanted peace. He wanted the problem to go away. He didn't see the danger. I really shouldn't touch the dress, Eleanor said, her voice barely a whisper. It's very delicate fabric, silk organza. If I slip... Are you refusing to help me? Jessica asked, her lower lip trembling in a perfect practice pout. On my wedding day? Well, almost my wedding day. I thought you wanted to be part of this. The trap was set. If Eleanor refused, she was the unsupportive, bitter mother-in-law. If she tried and failed... Fine, Eleanor whispered. Do you have a needle and thread? The attendant brought a sewing kit. Eleanor took the needle. It felt tiny, like a splinter of ice. She threaded it on the second try, which gave her a small boost of confidence. She walked toward the podium where Jessica stood. The lights were bright and hot. Just a small tuck here, Jessica instructed, pointing to the shoulder strap. Tighten it up. Eleanor stepped up onto the podium. She was close to Jessica now. She could smell the expensive perfume again, cloying and sweet. She raised her hands. They were shaking, not just a little. They were fluttering like trapped birds. She took a deep breath, trying to deploy her calming techniques. Heavy stone, still water. She moved the needle toward the strap. Careful, Jessica hissed, low enough that only Eleanor could hear. Don't poke me, you old witch. Eleanor flinched. The needle slipped, scratching the surface of the fabric, but not puncturing it. Sorry, Eleanor gasped. Just do it, Jessica commanded aloud, masking her previous tone with impatience. Eleanor tried again. She managed to catch the fabric. She needed to pull the thread through. As she pulled, Jessica moved. It wasn't a big movement. It was a subtle, sharp jerk of her shoulder, as if she were adjusting her posture. But timing was everything. Eleanor's hand was tense, holding the delicate lace. When Jessica jerked away, Eleanor's hand didn't release fast enough. Ra-I-P? The sound was sickening. It was the sound of money tearing. It was the sound of a heart breaking. The delicate lace strap didn't just detach. It tore away a chunk of the bodice, leaving a jagged, gaping hole on the left side of the gown. The room went into a state of suspended animation. For 1 second, no one breathed. Then, chaos. Jessica screamed. It was a blood-curdling sound. She looked at her shoulder, then at Eleanor, her eyes wide with theatrical horror. "You ruined it! You ruined my dress!" I didn't," Eleanor stammered, backing away, the needle still clutched in her trembling hand. "You moved. Jessica, you moved." "I was standing perfectly still," Jessica yelled, tears instantly streaming down her face. She turned to the room, arms wide. "Did you see that? Did you see her? She stabbed the dress. She pulled it." Linda rushed forward, grabbing Eleanor by the arm and shoving her back. "Get away from her, you clumsy idiot." Mark ran to the podium. He looked at the tear in the dress. It was bad. "Mom," Mark said, his voice full of disbelief. "Mark, she did it on purpose," Jessica sobbed, collapsing into his arms. "I saw her eyes. She was looking at me with so much hate. She's jealous because I wouldn't wear her dirty old veil, so she destroyed my dress." "No," Eleanor pleaded. She looked at Mark, her eyes searching for her son. "Mark, no, I would never." My hand, it shook, and she moved. Mark looked at Eleanor. He looked at her hands, which were now shaking so violently that she dropped the needle on the floor. He didn't see a mother who had been set up. He saw a liability. He saw an old woman whose pride had caused a disaster. He saw the logic in Jessica's accusation, the rejected veil, the tension at dinner. It all fit. "Mum," Mark said, his voice cold and hard, "why did you try to do it if you knew you couldn't?" The question hit Eleanor harder than a physical blow. "Mark, you asked me to," she whispered. "I asked you to fix it, not destroy it," Mark shouted. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice at her. The store manager rushed over with the attendant. "Please, everyone, calm down. We can fix this. We can order a rush replacement panel." "Get her out of here," Jessica wailed, burying her face in Mark's chest. "I can't look at her. She's toxic. She's trying to ruin everything." Mark turned to his mother. His face was red, his jaw tight. "Mum, you need to go." "Mark, please, listen. Go." Mark pointed to the door. "Just go home, Mum, before you break anything else." Eleanor looked around the room. The bridesmaids were glaring at her with disgust. Linda looked ready to strike her. The photographer had lowered his camera, looking awkward, and Jessica, for a fleeting second, amidst the fake sobs, Eleanor saw Jessica's face peeking out from Mark's shirt. Her eyes met Eleanor's. There was no effortless beauty there. There was only malice and a tiny, triumphant smirk. Eleanor turned around. She felt small. She felt invisible. She walked out of the fitting suite, past the rows of pristine white gowns that mocked her grey existence. She walked out into the street. It had started to rain. She didn't have an umbrella. She walked to her car, the water mixing with the tears on her face. Her hands were shaking so bad she couldn't get the key in the ignition. She sat there for 10 minutes, sobbing, hitting the steering wheel with her palms. "I am not useless," she cried to the empty car. "I am not malicious." But the world didn't hear her. The narrative had been written. In that boutique, under the bright lights, Eleanor had been cast as the villain. Back inside the boutique, the drama continued for another hour. Finally, peace was restored with the promise of a rush repair and a heavy discount. As they were leaving, Jessica asked Mark for his phone. "I need to check the time," she said innocently. She didn't check the time. She quickly opened his text messages. She found the thread with Eleanor. She blocked the number. Then she went to his call log. Blocked. She handed the phone back to him with a kiss. "Thank you for defending me, baby. I know that was hard, but you did the right thing. We have to protect our peace." Mark nodded, feeling a heavy knot in his stomach. "Yeah, I guess." That night, Eleanor tried to call Mark to explain, to tell him about the jerk of the shoulder, to tell him she loved him. The number you have dialed is not accepting calls at this time. She tried again and again. She realised then that the tear in the dress was nothing compared to the tear in their family, and unlike the dress, she didn't have the tools to fix this. 3 days later, the letter arrived. It wasn't a wedding invitation. It was a typed letter, unsigned, but the font was the same one used on their wedding website. Due to recent events and the stress caused to the bride, we feel it is best that you do not attend the ceremony or the reception. We hope you understand that this is for the best. We will send you photos. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, reading the letter over and over until the words blurred. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She stood up slowly. She walked to the living room. She looked at the corner where the camera was. The red light blinked. Mark had installed it to watch over her. Now it was the only thing in the world that truly saw her. She picked up the phone. She didn't call Mark. She called the flower shop. "Hello," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I need to cancel the order for the centerpieces, the ones for the rehearsal dinner." "Yes, the check." "Yes, cancel the check." She wasn't being vindictive. She was just accepting reality. She wasn't a mother of the groom anymore. She was a ghost. But ghosts have a way of haunting the living, and Eleanor wasn't done yet. She had one last gift to give, but it wouldn't be wrapped in lace. She went to the closet and pulled out the white box with the veil. She opened it. She took her scissors. For a moment she hovered over the lace, the same way she had hovered over Jessica's dress. But she didn't cut it. Instead, she cut a small piece of fabric from an old shirt of Mark's, a flannel shirt he wore in high school. She stitched the small blue square into the hem of the veil, a traditional something blue. She packed it up again. "I will be there," she whispered, "even if you don't see me." She didn't know how, and she didn't know when, but she knew the story wasn't over. The cliffhanger of her life hung in the balance. Mark was gone. The wedding was a week away, and in the silence of her home, Eleanor began to prepare for a war she hadn't started, but one she intended to finish. The nanny cam blinked, recording. The silence in Eleanor's house was not empty. It was heavy. It pressed against the windows like a physical weight. 3 days had passed since the letter arrived. 3 days of checking the phone, hoping the block had been lifted. 3 days of staring at the garden where the hydrangeas were beginning to wilt, mirroring her own spirit. Mark hadn't called, but he was coming. Eleanor knew he was coming because she knew the rhythm of his guilt. Even as a boy, when he broke a vase or failed a test, he would avoid her for days, then appear suddenly, hovering in the doorway, needing absolution. He was a good man with a soft heart, and soft hearts are the easiest to bruise and the easiest to mould. It was Tuesday evening. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm. Eleanor sat in the living room, not knitting, not reading, just waiting. When the headlights swept across the front window, she didn't jump. She just smoothed her skirt and clasped her hands together to steady the tremor. The key turned in the lock. Mark still had his key. That small fact gave her a flicker of hope. He hadn't taken that away yet. He stepped inside. He looked exhausted. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his tie was loosened, hanging crookedly around his neck. He looked like a man who had been running a marathon in sand. "Mom?" he called out softly, even though he saw her sitting right there. "I'm here, Mark," Eleanor said. He didn't take off his shoes. He stood on the entryway rug, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked around the room, avoiding her eyes. He looked at the mantelpiece photos, the old clock, the worn carpet. He looked everywhere but at her face. Did you get the letter?" he asked. His voice was tight, constrained. "I did," Eleanor replied. Her voice was calm, surprising even herself. It was very formal. Due to recent events, it sounded like a legal notice. Mark winced. He ran a hand down his face. I know. I'm sorry. Jessica wrote it. I mean, we wrote it together. But she thought it was best to be clear. It was certainly clear. Mum, look. Mark took a step forward, finally entering the living room proper. It's not what I want. You know that, right? But Jessica is... She's fragile right now. That day at the shop, it really traumatized her. She's been having nightmares about the dress. Eleanor felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. Nightmares about a dress. She was living a nightmare of losing her only child, but she pushed it down. Anger wouldn't work here. Anger would only prove Jessica right. I didn't mean to tear it, Mark, Eleanor said gently. You have to believe that. I want to believe it, Mark said, and the agony in his voice was real. But, Mom, you have to admit, your hands, they aren't what they used to be. And you've been so critical of her. The veil, the food, the comments. I haven't made any comments. She told me, Mark interrupted, his voice rising slightly in defence. She told me what you said to Aunt Clara, that you said Jessica was a gold digger and that our family was too good for her. Eleanor's mouth fell open. Mark, I haven't spoken to Clara in months. I never said that. Mark looked torn. He was caught between two realities. In one, his mother was the saint who raised him. In the other, the woman he loved was telling him his mother was a monster. He chose the path of least resistance. He chose the reality that slept in his bed every night. It doesn't matter who said what anymore, Mark said, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. The damage is done. The wedding is in 4 days. The stress is eating us alive. Jessica said, she can't walk down the aisle if she sees you there. She says she'll be waiting for you to trip or drop something or cause a scene. She says it's you or her. The ultimatum hung in the air. It's you or her. Eleanor looked at her son. She saw the lines of worry etched into his forehead. She saw the way his hands shook slightly, not from Parkinson's, but from anxiety. He was breaking. If she fought this, if she insisted on coming, she would force him to choose. And if he chose his mother, he would lose his bride. He would be miserable. He would blame Eleanor for destroying his happiness. And if he chose Jessica, he would have to publicly disown his mother. The guilt would rot him from the inside out. There was only one way to save him. She had to make the choice for him. She had to be the one to let go. A profound, sorrowful peace settled over Eleanor. It was the peace of a soldier accepting a suicide mission. She's right, Eleanor said softly. Mark's head snapped up. What? She's right, Eleanor repeated, her voice stronger. My hands are getting worse. I dropped a cup this morning. I would be nervous at the wedding. I might spill something. I might trip. Mum, you don't have to... No, Mark, listen. A wedding is about the future. It's about the couple. It shouldn't be about worrying whether an old woman can hold a fork. She forced a smile. It felt like cracking glass. I don't want to be the reason you're stressed. I don't want to be a liability. She used the word Jessica had used. Mark flinched as if she had slapped him. I didn't say that, he whispered. It's okay. Eleanor stood up. She walked over to him. She wanted to hug him, but she sensed he was brittle, ready to shatter. She stopped a foot away. I won't come. I'll stay here. I'll celebrate in my own way. You go. You marry that girl. You be happy. Mark's eyes filled with tears. He looked at her with a mixture of immense relief and crushing shame. He was being let off the hook, and he knew he didn't deserve it. Are you sure? He asked, his voice trembling. I can try to talk to her again. No, Eleanor shook her head. Don't fight with her. Not before the wedding. It's decided. I'm tired, Mark. Honestly, the crowds, the noise, it's a lot for me these days. I think I'd prefer a quiet evening. It was the biggest lie she had ever told. She would prefer to crawl over broken glass to see him get married, but she lied with the conviction of a mother protecting her cub. Mark let out a long, shuddering breath. His shoulders dropped 3 inches. Okay, he whispered. Okay, if you're sure. I'm sure. He stood there for a moment longer, awkward in his own childhood home. The dynamic had shifted. He was no longer the son. He was the guest, and a welcome one no longer. I should go, he said. I have to pick up the tuxedos. Go, Eleanor nodded. He turned to the door, then he stopped. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. I just want to check the system, he mumbled, tapping the screen. The cameras, since I won't be checking in as much this week. I want to make sure they're recording properly. In case you fall. The irony was bitter. He was pushing her off the cliff, but he wanted to make sure the camera caught the impact. That's thoughtful of you, Eleanor said dryly. Mark looked at the screen. Yeah. Living room cam is clear. Kitchen cam is clear. Okay. It's all good. The cloud storage is full, so I'll just set it to loop recording. It'll overwrite the old stuff if nothing happens. Good, Eleanor said. Well, Mark put the phone away. He put his hand on the doorknob. He hesitated. For a second, Eleanor thought he might turn around, apologize, and beg her to come. But he didn't. I'll send you photos, he said to the door, and we'll visit, after the honeymoon, when things settle down. Goodbye, Mark. Bye, Mum. The door closed, the lock clicked, the sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty house. Eleanor stood in the hallway for a long time. She listened to the car engine start, reverse, and fade away. Then her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, not gracefully, but in a heap of fabric and limbs. She didn't cry immediately. She just sat there, staring at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light from the window. She had done it. She had set him free. She was officially erased from the wedding. But as she sat there, a different feeling began to rise beneath the sorrow. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. Throughout this whole process, she had been passive. She had tried to be the good mother, the silent supporter. She had let Jessica rewrite the narrative. She had let Jessica paint her as a villain. But Eleanor was not a villain, and she was not a victim. She was a mother, and a mother's job isn't just to coddle. Sometimes it's to teach. Mark was walking into a marriage built on lies. Jessica had lied about the veil, lied about the dress, and lied about Eleanor's words. If Mark married her without knowing the truth, he wasn't making a choice. He was walking into a trap. Eleanor looked up at the ceiling toward the corner of the living room. The small red light of the camera blinked. Blink, blink, blink. It had seen everything. Mark had said he set it to loop recording. He said he wouldn't be checking it, but the data was there. The truth was stored in the cloud, floating in the digital ether, waiting to be pulled down. Eleanor struggled to her feet. She walked to the kitchen. She made herself a cup of tea. Her hands shook, splashing hot water on the counter, but she didn't care. She wiped it up. She went to the closet and pulled out the white box again. The veil. She took it to the living room. She placed it on the coffee table, directly in the line of sight of the camera. She sat down on the sofa. She looked straight into the lens. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She opened the box. She took out the veil. She unfolded it, the lace cascading over her lap like a waterfall. She picked up her needle and thread. She began to sew the small blue patch, the piece of Mark's old flannel shirt, into the hem. She worked slowly, painfully. Her hand jerked. She pricked her finger. A drop of blood welled up, bright red against the white lace. She quickly dabbed it away with a tissue. She didn't stop. She sewed with the determination of a woman stitching her heart back together. She imagined Mark watching this. Not now, but someday. She imagined him seeing her sitting here, alone, 3 days before his wedding, sewing a good luck charm into a veil that had been rejected for a bride who despised her. She imagined him seeing the tears that finally began to fall, silent and steady, tracking through the wrinkles on her cheeks. She spoke to the empty room, knowing the microphone would catch the whisper, "I love you, Mark. I love you enough to stay away, but I love you too much to let you live a lie forever." She finished the stitch. She bit the thread. She folded the veil back into the box. She stood up and walked to the window. The storm had broken. Rain lashed against the glass. Meanwhile, across the city, Mark sat in his car in the parking lot of the tuxedo rental shop. He hadn't gone in yet. He felt sick. He felt like a coward. He pulled out his phone. He opened the camera app. He saw the live feed of his mother's living room. She was standing by the window, her back to the camera, watching the rain. She looked so small. His thumb hovered over the playback button. He wanted to see what she did after he left. Did she cry? Did she call Aunt Clara to complain? He needed to justify his decision. He needed to see her being toxic so he could feel better about banning her. He tapped events. A list of video clips appeared. Motion detected, 6:30 p.m. Motion detected, 6:45 p.m. He tapped the most recent one. Just then, his car window tapped. Rap, rap, rap. Mark jumped. It was Jessica. She was standing in the rain, holding a large umbrella, her face a mask of concern. She had tracked his location. "Babe," she shouted through the glass. "What are you doing? The fitting is in 10 minutes. We're late." Mark looked at the phone. The video was buffering. The little wheel was spinning. He looked at Jessica. She looked beautiful in the rain, urgent and demanding. "I'm coming," he yelled back. He closed the app. He threw the phone onto the passenger seat. He got out of the car and ran under Jessica's umbrella. She hooked her arm through his. "Did you talk to her?" Jessica asked as they walked toward the shop. "Yeah," Mark said, the rain soaking his suit. "She's not coming." "Oh, thank God," Jessica exhaled, squeezing his arm. "I was so worried she would make a scene. Now we can focus on us. It's going to be perfect, Mark, just perfect." Mark nodded, but as they walked away, he felt a strange sensation, a phantom vibration in his pocket, a ghost in the machine. He had left the truth behind in the cloud. He thought he had closed the door on his mother, but he was wrong. The file was there, and files have a way of being opened when you least expect it. The curtain fell on Act 1. The stage was set. The players were in position. The silence had been established. Now the noise would begin. The city was consumed by a heat wave. It was an unseasonable, suffocating heat that rose from the asphalt and made the air shimmer with exhaustion. For Mark, the temperature outside was perfectly synchronized with the atmosphere inside the Grand Plaza Hotel. 5 days until the wedding. The ballroom was a cavernous space of crystal and velvet. It smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and fresh lilies, thousands of them. Jessica had ordered white lilies, specifically the ones that cost $12 a stem. She wanted a white forest theme. Mark stood in the center of the room, holding a clipboard he didn't know how to use. He felt less like a groom and more like an intern. Workmen were shouting instructions, drilling into the walls to hang massive silk drapes. "Move that arch to the left," Jessica's voice cut through the noise like a whip. She was standing on a riser, wearing a white power suit, directing a team of florists. No, the other left. It needs to frame the entrance, not block it. Mark watched her. She was undeniably efficient. She treated the wedding like a military operation, but as he watched her berate a young florist for dropping a petal, he felt a cold knot in his stomach. He tried to tell himself it was just stress. She wants it to be perfect, he repeated mentally. It's her dream day. But where was his dream? He looked down at the clipboard. It was the seating chart. He scanned the names. The bride's side was a sea of people. Cousins, second cousins, college friends, influencers, business partners. The groom's side was sparse, with Eleanor gone and the relatives from Ohio uninvited due to capacity issues, another battle Mark had lost. His side of the room looked like a ghost town. "Babe," Jessica called out, snapping her fingers. "Focus! The table centerpieces. Do you like the crystal towers or the silver candelabras?" Mark looked up. "I thought we'd decided on the wood accents to make it feel warmer." Jessica laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Wood? In a ballroom?" "Mark, honey, we aren't having a barn dance. It's crystal." "Obviously." "Right," Mark said. "Crystal." He walked over to the side of the room where a long table was being set up. This was the heritage table, a place to display photos of parents and grandparents. It was a tradition Mark had actually fought for. He wanted a photo of his dad there. He wanted a photo of Eleanor from her own wedding day, wearing the veil. He saw a frame lying face down on the table. He picked it up. It was the photo of his parents, Eleanor and Robert, cutting their cake in 1985. They looked young, radiant, and simple. Eleanor's dress was homemade, the lace modest but elegant. "Oh, we're not using that one," a voice said behind him. Mark turned. It was the wedding planner, a woman named Chloe, who wore all black and looked perpetually bored. "Why not?" Mark asked, gripping the frame. Chloe sighed, checking her iPad. "Jessica said it doesn't fit the palette. The photo is sepia-toned. It clashes with the cool greys and whites of the theme. Plus, the frame is dated." "It's my parents," Mark said, his voice dropping. "My dad is dead. This is the only way he can be here." "I understand," Chloe said, not sounding understanding at all. "But Jessica selected a different photo for you. Here." She handed him a sleek silver frame. Inside was a photo of Mark and Jessica at their engagement shoot in Paris. "This is the heritage table," Mark said, confused. "This is a photo of us." "It's the new heritage," Chloe explained with a shrug. "Jessica wants to focus on the future, not the past. She said old photos make people think of, well, death. It brings down the vibe." Mark looked at the photo of his parents. He looked at his father's smile, the same smile Mark saw in the mirror every day. He felt a sudden surge of protectiveness. "No," Mark said. Chloe blinked. "Excuse me?" "Put this back," Mark said, placing his parents' photo on the centre of the table. "I don't care about the palette. My father stays." Chloe looked nervous. "Jessica won't like it." "I don't care," Mark lied. He cared very much. He was terrified of the fight that would ensue, but the shame of erasing his father was stronger than the fear of his fiancé. He walked away before Chloe could argue. He needed air. He went to the groom's lounge, which turned out to be a small storage room converted with a leather sofa and a mini fridge. He sat down and put his head in his hands. The silence of the room amplified the noise in his head. He thought of his mother. What was she doing right now? Was she crying? Was she angry? He pulled out his phone. He opened the camera app. Live feed, living room. The room was empty. The television was off. The curtains were drawn against the heat. On the coffee table, the white box sat alone. He switched to the kitchen feed. Empty. A single teacup sat in the sink. She must be out, maybe at the grocery store, maybe at the cemetery visiting Dad. He felt a pang of longing so sharp it almost doubled him over. He wanted to call her. He wanted to hear her voice, even if she was just talking about the weather or the price of tomatoes. He wanted to tell her about the lilies and the crystal towers and how much he hated them. But he couldn't. He had drawn the line. He had chosen his side. Suddenly, the door to the lounge flew open. Jessica burst in, looking flustered. "There you are," she exclaimed. "I've been looking everywhere. We have a crisis." Mark sat up, hiding his phone. "What is it? The cake?" "Worse." Jessica paced the small room, wringing her hands. "The venue for the bridesmaids' luncheon tomorrow. The rooftop garden at the Metro Hotel. They just called. A pipe burst. The whole terrace is flooded with sewage." "That's terrible," Mark said, though a small part of him was relieved it wasn't a problem he had to fix. "It's a disaster," Jessica shrieked. "I have 12 girls flying in. We have a photographer booked for noon. I need a garden setting. I need hydrangeas. I need rustic charm. Where am I going to find a private garden in the city on 24 hours' notice?" She stopped pacing. She looked at Mark. Her eyes widened. Mark knew that look. It was the look of a shark smelling blood. "No," Mark said instinctively. "Mark!" Jessica rushed over and knelt in front of him, grabbing his hands. "Your mum's house, the backyard. It's blooming right now, isn't it? The hydrangeas are blue. It's perfect. It's vintage. It's exactly the aesthetic we need for the tea in the garden shoot." "Jess, we can't," Mark said, pulling his hands away. "We just banned her from the wedding." "You can't ask to use her house." "We're not asking her," Jessica said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You said she goes to the community centre on Wednesdays to play bridge, right? From 10 to 4. "Yes, but—" "So she won't even be there," Jessica beamed. "We just need the yard. We'll go in through the side gate. We'll set up the tables, take the photos, have a quick toast, and be gone before she even gets home. We'll clean everything up. She'll never know." "That's trespassing, Jess." "It's not trespassing if it's your house too. You grew up there. You have a key." "It's wrong," Mark shook his head. "It's disrespectful. We kicked her out of our lives, and now we want to use her lawn as a prop." Jessica stood up. The sweetness vanished. The ice returned. "Mark, do you want this wedding to happen or not?" "Stop doing that," Mark snapped. "Stop threatening the wedding every time I disagree with you." "I'm not threatening," Jessica said coldly. "I'm stating facts. I am stressed. I am on the edge. I need you to solve this for me. I need a venue. If you can't provide one, then what are you even doing here? Are you my partner, or are you just another problem I have to manage?" She let the question hang in the air. She knew exactly where to hit him, right in his insecurity. Mark looked at her. He saw the panic behind the anger. He convinced himself that she was just overwhelmed. He convinced himself that helping her now would calm her down, make the wedding weekend smoother. "She goes to the cemetery on Wednesdays before bridge," Mark muttered. "She leaves at 9. Jessica clapped her hands. "Perfect. We'll be in and out by 2. Thank you, baby. You're a lifesaver." She kissed him on the cheek, a hard, fast peck, and ran out of the room, already dialing her phone. "Chloe, I found a venue. Get the vintage tea sets." Mark sat alone in the storage room. He felt dirty. He felt like a thief. He looked at his phone again. The empty living room stared back at him. "I'm sorry, Mum," he thought. "Just this one last time. Then I'll make it up to you." Wednesday morning broke with a dazzling, cruel sunshine. Eleanor left her house at 9 a.m. sharp. She wore her black coat, carrying a small bouquet of daisies for Robert. She walked slowly to the bus stop, her gait uneven but determined. The moment her bus turned the corner, a convoy of SUVs pulled into her driveway. It was an invasion. Jessica jumped out of the lead car wearing a white sundress and a wide-brimmed hat. "Okay, ladies, let's move. We have good light for only 3 hours." The bridesmaids swarmed the property. They carried crates of champagne, tiered cake stands, and massive floral arrangements that looked ridiculous next to Eleanor's modest garden beds. Mark unlocked the side gate. He didn't go inside the house. He refused to cross the threshold. He stayed in the yard, leaning against the old oak tree he used to climb as a boy, watching the desecration. Chloe, the planner, began barking orders. "Move those garden gnomes. They're hideous. Hide them behind the shed. And that wind chime, take it down. It's making too much noise for the video." Mark watched as a bridesmaid grabbed Eleanor's favourite ceramic gnome, a gift from Mark when he was 10, and carelessly tossed it behind a bush. He heard a crack. He flinched. He should say something. "Don't ruin the vibe," he told himself. "Just let them finish." They set up a long, low table on the grass. Terrace. They draped it with lace. Cheap, synthetic lace that looked nothing like the heirloom veil. They popped corks. Champagne sprayed over Eleanor's prize rose bushes. "Cheers to the bride!" they screamed, clinking glasses. Jessica was in her element. She posed with a teacup, laughing fake laughs for the camera. She twirled in the centre of the lawn, trampling the small patch of mint Eleanor grew for her tea. "This place is actually kind of cute," one bridesmaid said, looking at the peeling paint of the back porch in a shabby chic way. "It's totally rustic," Jessica agreed, sipping her champagne. "It smells a bit like old people, though. Did you bring the scented candles?" They lit candles that smelled of artificial vanilla, masking the scent of the earth and the flowers. Mark stood in the shadows. He felt like a ghost haunting his own childhood. He looked at the kitchen window. The blinds were drawn. He wondered if the cameras could see through the windows. He checked his phone. The kitchen camera was angled toward the back door. It could see a slice of the yard. It could see the edge of the table. It could see Jessica standing there, holding a bottle of champagne. He felt a chill. The system was recording. "Mark!" Jessica yelled. "Come take a picture with us. You need to be the gardener boy for a TikTok." "I'm good," Mark called back, his voice hoarse. "I'm just watching the gate." "Ugh, you're no fun." Jessica rolled her eyes. She turned back to her friends. "Okay, girls, listen up. I have a story. You know that tear in my dress, the one I told you about?" The bridesmaids leaned in, eager for gossip. The photographer kept snapping. "So," Jessica began, her voice loud and carrying across the quiet yard, "his mum didn't just rip it. She practically attacked me with the needle. I swear she has this weird obsession with Mark. It's totally Jocasta complex. She's been trying to sabotage the wedding for months." "No way," a bridesmaid gasped. "Yes way," Jessica laughed, gesturing with her glass. "She tried to give me this mouldy old veil that smelled like mothballs. And when I politely declined, she went psycho. That's why she's banned." I told Mark, "It's her or me." And guess who he chose? She spread her arms wide, basking in her victory. "He chose the hot one," a friend shouted. They all cheered. Mark stood by the tree, his blood turning to ice. He heard every word. "She practically attacked me. Mouldy old veil. Psycho." He knew it was a lie. He knew his mother. He knew she was gentle to a fault, but hearing Jessica twist the truth so casually, so cruelly, in his mother's own garden, it made him feel sick. He pushed off the tree. He wanted to walk over there and flip the table. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. He was a coward. He was a man who had sold his spine for a quiet life. "Hey!" Jessica shouted, pointing at the house. "I need to use the bathroom. Mark, give me the key to the back door." "No," Mark said. "Mark, I really need to go. It's an emergency." She did the little dance. "Just the back bathroom. I won't touch anything." Mark hesitated. Then slowly he reached into his pocket. He took out the key. "Don't touch anything," he warned. Just the bathroom. Jessica grabbed the key. You're the best. She ran to the back door. She unlocked it. She stepped into the kitchen. Mark watched the door close behind her. He looked at his phone again. The app was open. Live feed kitchen. The image on the screen was crisp. Jessica walked into the frame. She didn't go to the bathroom. She walked to the refrigerator. She opened it. She wrinkled her nose. She took out a pitcher of iced tea that Eleanor always kept there. She took a swig straight from the pitcher, then made a face and poured the rest into the sink. Gross, she muttered. The microphone on the camera picked it up clearly. Then she walked into the living room. Mark switched the feed. Live feed. Living room. Jessica stood in the centre of the room. She looked around with disdain. She ran a finger along the mantelpiece, checking for dust. She saw the white box on the coffee table, the box Eleanor had been working on just days ago. Jessica's eyes lit up. Curiosity got the better of her. She approached the table. She opened the box. She pulled out the veil. She held it up, looking at the delicate lace. She laughed. She draped it over her head, mocking a traditional bride. She started doing a grotesque, stumbling walk, shaking her hands violently, mimicking Eleanor's tremor. "Look at me," she said to the empty room. "I'm Eleanor. I'm shaking. I'm so sad and lonely." She spun around, laughing at her own performance. Then she stopped. She noticed something on the hem of the veil. She brought it closer to her face, the small blue square of flannel. Mark's old shirt. She stared at it for a moment. She didn't understand the sentiment, and she only saw a patch. "Tacky," she whispered. She threw the veil on the floor. She didn't put it back in the box. She just dropped it on the carpet like a used tissue. Then she turned and walked toward the bathroom, disappearing from the frame. Outside, under the oak tree, Mark stared at his phone screen. His hand was gripping the device so hard his knuckles were white. He had seen it, the mockery, the cruelty, the desecration of the veil, but most importantly, the camera had seen it, and the camera was recording. Mark felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was the feeling of a blindfold being ripped off, taking layers of skin with it. Jessica came back out 5 minutes later, looking refreshed. "Okay, girls," she clapped. "Pack it up. We have a spa appointment at 3. The swarm of bridesmaids began to clean up. They shoved the trash into bags. They retrieved the garden gnome, now chipped. They left the grass trampled and muddy. "Let's go, Mark," Jessica called, heading for the car. Mark didn't move. He stared at the back door. "Mark," Jessica stopped. "Are you coming?" Mark looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, the overlay of perfect fiancé was gone. He saw the sharp edges. He saw the rot beneath the veneer. "Yeah," Mark said quietly. "I'm coming." He walked to the back door. "I need to lock up." "Hurry up!" Mark went into the kitchen. He walked into the living room. He saw the veil on the floor. It looked like a puddle of spilt milk. He walked over and picked it up. He dusted it off gently. He saw the blue patch. He recognized the flannel immediately. It was his favourite shirt from high school, the one he wore when he won the debate championship, the one his mum had saved. Tears pricked his eyes. Something blue. He folded the veil carefully and put it back in the box. He placed the box back on the table, exactly where it had been. He looked up at the camera in the corner. He nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "I see you," he thought, "and I'm sorry." He turned and left the house. He locked the door. He got into the car with Jessica. She was scrolling through the photos on her camera. "Oh my God, this lighting is insane," she gushed. "I'm going to get so many likes." Mark started the car. He drove in silence. The seeds of the explosion had been planted. The footage existed. The evidence was irrefutable, but Mark wasn't ready to blow it up yet. He was still in shock. He needed time. He needed to process the monster sitting in the passenger seat. And Eleanor? Eleanor was on the bus, coming home. She didn't know her sanctuary had been violated. She didn't know her veil had been mocked. But she would find out, because the system was set to send a notification when the storage was almost full, and the storage was getting full. The bus ride home felt longer than usual for Eleanor. The heat wave had turned the vehicle into a rolling oven, and the air conditioning was broken. She sat near the back, clutching her bouquet of wilting daisies, her head leaning against the vibrating glass. She felt a strange unease. It was a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the kind she used to get when Mark was a toddler and had gone too quiet in the other room. It was the instinct of a mother sensing a disturbance in her nest. She got off at her stop and walked up the hill. Her street was quiet. The neighbours were indoors, hiding from the sun. When she reached her driveway, she stopped. The gate to the backyard was unlatched. The metal bar was resting slightly askew, not clicked into the groove where she always placed it. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Had she forgotten? No. She was forgetful with names sometimes, and her hands were shaky, but she was obsessive about security. Since living alone, locking the gate was a ritual. She pushed the gate open. It creaked, a familiar sound that now seemed ominous. She stepped into her garden. At first glance, it looked normal. The oak tree stood tall, the grass was green, but then the small details began to scream at her. The grass near the centre of the lawn was flattened, not just walked on, but matted down in a large rectangular shape, as if a heavy table had been placed there. She looked at her rose bushes. The peace roses, her pride and joy, were dripping. It hadn't rained. She touched a wet leaf. It was sticky. She sniffed it. Alcohol. Cheap, sweet champagne. She walked further. She saw something glinting near the shed. She walked over. It was her ceramic garden gnome, the one with the red hat Mark had bought her, with his allowance money 20 years ago. It was lying on its side, half hidden behind a fern. The red hat was chipped, a jagged piece of white clay exposed like a bone. Eleanor picked it up. Her hands trembled, not from Parkinson's this time, but from a cold, creeping violation. Someone had been here. Someone had been in her sanctuary. She moved to the back porch. She saw muddy footprints on the wooden slats. High heels, small, sharp indentations in the wood. She unlocked the back door and stepped into the kitchen. The smell hit her instantly. It wasn't the smell of her lavender soap or the lingering scent of toast. It was an aggressive, artificial vanilla scent. A candle? No, perfume. Heavy, expensive perfume. She looked at the sink. There were droplets of brown liquid in the stainless steel basin. She smelled it. Iced tea. Her iced tea. She walked into the living room. The air felt disturbed. The stillness she had left that morning had been churned up. She looked at the coffee table. The white box. She had left it parallel to the edge of the table. Now it was turned at a 45-degree angle. She rushed to it. She opened the lid. The veil was there, but it was folded haphazardly, bunching up in the corners. She had left it smooth. Eleanor sank onto the sofa. She didn't call the police. She didn't scream. She knew who had done this. The perfume was the same one that lingered in the hallway after family dinners. The champagne on the roses. The entitlement. It wasn't a burglary, it was a message. We can come here. We can take what we want. You are not safe, even in your absence. She looked up at the camera in the corner. Did you see them? She whispered to the blinking red light. She didn't know how to check the footage. Mark handled the technical side. She was locked out of her own evidence. She spent the rest of the afternoon scrubbing the kitchen floor, trying to wash away the invisible footprints. She watered the roses, trying to rinse away the alcohol. She glued the gnome's hat back together, holding the pieces until her fingers cramped. But the crack remained. Downtown, the sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the city skyline. Mark and Jessica were in their penthouse apartment. The air was cool, conditioned, and tense. Jessica was on the sofa, her laptop open. She was furiously editing the photos from the afternoon. "Look at this one, babe," she said, tilting the screen toward Mark. "The lighting is divine. You can't even tell it's a dumpy backyard. It looks like a secret garden in Tuscany." Mark sat in the armchair, holding a glass of scotch. He hadn't taken a sip in 20 minutes. He looked at the photo. It was Jessica, laughing, holding a teacup, surrounded by her bridesmaids. It looked perfect. It looked like a lie. "Yeah," Mark said. "Great." "What's wrong with you?" Jessica snapped, closing the laptop slightly. "You've been moping ever since we left. Are you worried about your mum finding out?" "Who cares? What is she going to do? Sue us?" "It's not about that," Mark said. "It's about respect." "Respect is earned, Mark, and she lost mine when she tried to destroy my dress." Jessica stood up, stretching. "I'm going to take a bath. We have the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. I need to depuff." She walked to the bathroom, shedding her clothes as she went. Mark watched her. He used to look at her with desire. Now, he looked at her with a clinical detachment, as if he was studying a specimen under a microscope. The bathroom door closed. The water started running. Mark waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. He set his glass down. He picked up his iPad. He needed to know. He had seen the mockery of the veil on his phone earlier, but the connection had been spotty, and he had closed it when Jessica arrived. He needed to see the rest. He needed to see what happened in those 5 minutes she was inside the house alone. He opened the security app. He logged in as administrator. He went to the cloud archive. He found the timestamp, Wednesday, 11:15 a.m. He put on his noise-cancelling headphones. He pressed play. The video filled the screen. He watched the scene he had already seen. Jessica drinking the tea, spitting it out. Jessica mocking the tremor. Jessica throwing the veil on the floor. He felt the same surge of nausea, but he forced himself to keep watching. After she threw the veil, Jessica didn't leave immediately. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. She dialed a number. Mark turned up the volume. On the screen, Jessica paced around the living room, kicking the edge of the rug. "Mum?" Jessica said into the phone. "Yeah, we're at the house." "No, the old hag isn't here. Mark said she's at the cemetery visiting his dad, probably crying over a gravestone like a loser." Mark's jaw tightened. Jessica laughed. "I know, right? It's perfect. The yard is actually decent. Once she's gone, like gone, we can totally flip this place. It's worth at least $500,000 for the land alone." Mark froze. They had never discussed selling his mother's house. They had never discussed her dying. Jessica continued, checking her reflection in the mirror over the mantel. "Oh, don't worry about Mark. I have him wrapped. He feels so guilty about the dress. He'll do anything I say." She paused, listening to the person on the other end, presumably Linda. Then she said the words that would change everything. "No, Mum, you didn't see it. It was hilarious. I saw her hand shaking and I just tweaked my shoulder, just a little jerk." "Rip." Jessica mimed the motion, laughing. She looked so terrified, like a deer in headlights. "I mean, honestly, I did her a favour. That dress was a little tight anyway. Now I get a brand new panel for free, and I get the perfect excuse to ban her. 2 birds, 1 stone. Mark stopped breathing. The world stopped spinning. I just tweaked my shoulder. Just a little jerk. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't even a misunderstanding. It was a setup, a cold, calculated, malicious setup. Jessica continued on the screen. "I know. I'm a genius. Okay, I gotta go. I need to go pretend to be a blushing bride in the garden. Love you." She hung up. She fixed her hair. She practiced a smile in the mirror. Bright, fake, dazzling. Then she walked out of the frame. Mark sat there in the dim light of the penthouse. The iPad screen went black as the clip ended. He took off the headphones. He heard the water splashing in the bathroom. He heard Jessica humming a tune. She was in there, soaking in lavender bubbles, believing she had won. Believing Mark was the soft, malleable idiot she had described. Mark stood up. He walked to the window. He looked down at the city traffic. A strange clarity washed over him. The confusion was gone. The guilt was gone. The conflict was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard resolve. She wanted a show. She wanted a cinematic wedding. He would give her one. But first, he had to survive the rehearsal. He had to play the part. He had to be the actor she thought he was. The rehearsal dinner, Thursday night. The rehearsal dinner was held at Lumiere, a French bistro with dim lighting and waiters who whispered. The room was packed with Jessica's family and friends. Mark sat at the head of the table, wearing a suit that felt like armour. Jessica sat next to him, glowing in a silver cocktail dress. To the happy couple, Linda raised her glass. To love that conquers all. Hear, hear, the room shouted. Mark raised his glass. He drank the wine. It tasted like vinegar. He looked around the table. He saw the faces of people who had been told his mother was a monster. They looked at him with pity. The poor groom with the toxic mother. So, Mark, one of Jessica's cousins asked, leaning across the table, is your mum getting help? We heard about the incident at the shop. Parkinson's can affect the mind too, right? Dementia. Mark gripped the stem of his glass. He wanted to shatter it. He wanted to stand up and scream the truth, but he looked at Jessica. She was watching him, her eyes sharp, daring him to ruin the mood. She's fine, Mark said quietly. She's just frail. Jessica squeezed his thigh under the table, a reward for his obedience. It's sad, really, Jessica sighed, looking at her cousin. We tried so hard to include her, but some people just can't handle others being happy. We have to protect our energy. Absolutely, Linda nodded. Boundaries are so important. Mark felt like he was suffocating. The air in the room was thick with lies. Every laugh felt like a jagged edge. He excused himself. Restroom. He walked to the back of the restaurant. He didn't go to the restroom. He went to the alleyway outside, near the dumpster. He took out his phone. He dialed a number. Hello? A voice answered. It was Dave, the lead AV technician for the wedding. Mark had met him briefly during the site visit. Dave, this is Mark, the groom. Oh, hey Mark, everything okay? Problem with the playlist? No, Mark said, looking up at the smog-filled sky. I need to make a change to the program. The video montage. The love story montage? It's already rendered, man. It's locked in. Unlock it, Mark said. His voice was low, devoid of emotion. I have a new file. I'm going to upload it to the server tonight. I need you to play it. No questions asked. I can't just swap files without the bride's approval, Mark. Jessica was very specific about the transitions. Dave, Mark said, I'm paying you an extra $2,000. Cash. Tonight. There was a silence on the line. Send the file, Dave said. I'll bring it on a drive tomorrow morning, before the ceremony. And Dave, check the audio levels. I want it loud. Understood. Mark hung up. He leaned against the brick wall. He felt a vibration in his pocket, a notification from the security app. Motion detected. Living room. He opened the feed. Eleanor was there. She was wearing her nightgown. She was sitting in the armchair, the one facing the empty fireplace. She wasn't sewing. She wasn't reading. She was holding the framed photo of Mark's father. She was talking to it. Mark turned up the volume on his phone, pressing it to his ear in the dirty alleyway. I don't know what to do, Robert. Eleanor's voice was thin, breaking. They came here today. They laughed at us. I feel like I'm disappearing. Am I disappearing? Is this what happens at the end? You just fade away until you're just a nuisance? She hugged the photo to her chest. I miss you. I miss us. I miss our boy. But I think he's gone too. Mark slid down the wall until he was crouching in the dirt. He covered his mouth to stifle a sob. I'm not gone, Mom, he thought. I'm right here, and I'm coming back. He stood up. He wiped his face. He adjusted his tie. He walked back into the restaurant. Jessica looked up as he sat down. Everything okay? You were gone a while. Just nerves, Mark said. He looked her straight in the eye. For the first time in months, he didn't look away. I'm fine. In fact, I'm ready. Jessica smiled, mistaking his resolve for submission. That's my good boy. She turned back to her friends, laughing. Mark picked up his fork. He ate his dinner. He needed the strength. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow was the show. And he was the director now. The wedding morning. The calm before the storm. The morning of the wedding was chaotic. The bridal suite was a flurry of hairspray and panic. Mark was in the groom's suite. He was alone. He had sent his groomsmen away. He had a laptop open on the desk. He had the footage. He had spent the night editing. He wasn't a professional editor, but anger is a powerful muse. He had cut the clips together. Clip 1, the conversation with Linda. Get the old hag out. Clip 2, the photo shoot mockery. The shaking hand imitation. Clip 3, the confession. I just tweaked my shoulder. Clip 4, the ending. He needed an ending. The cruelty was enough to destroy Jessica, but he needed something to redeem Eleanor. He needed the audience to not just hate the bride, but to love the mother. He searched the archives. He went back 2 days. He found it. The clip of Eleanor sewing the blue patch into the veil. The clip of her saying, I love you enough to stay away. He added it to the timeline. He added a title card at the beginning, the truth about the dress. He exported the file. Final cut.mp4. He put it on a USB drive. There was a knock at the door. Mark, it's time for photos, the photographer called. Mark put the drive in his pocket. He buttoned his jacket. He looked in the mirror. He looked different. He looked older. The softness around his eyes was gone. He opened the door. Let's do this, he said. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor was getting dressed. She wasn't supposed to go. She had promised not to go, but promises made under duress didn't count. She put on her best dress, a navy blue silk that she had made herself years ago. It was a bit loose now, as she had lost weight from stress, but it was elegant. She did her hair, pinning it up in a chignon. Her hands shook, taking 20 minutes to get the pins right, but she persisted. She put on her hat. She called a taxi. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked. The Grand Plaza Hotel, Eleanor said. She sat in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't going to cause a scene. She wasn't going to scream. She was going to witness. She had sewed a part of herself into the veil. But that wasn't enough. She needed to be there. She needed to see her son one last time before he belonged to someone else. She would sit in the back, in the shadows. She didn't know that Mark had seen the footage. She didn't know about the USB drive in his pocket. She thought she was walking into a tragedy. She didn't know she was walking into a revolution. The taxi merged onto the highway. The city skyline loomed ahead, bright and indifferent. At the hotel, the guests were arriving. The music was playing. The trap was set. The Grand Plaza ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland despite the scorching heat outside. The air conditioning was cranked so low that condensation formed on the crystal chandeliers. Thousands of white lilies stood in tall glass vases. their scent thick and cloying, masking the smell of the guests' perfumes. It was a masterpiece of design. It was a cathedral of ego. At 1:45 p.m., the guests began to take their seats. It was a sea of designer silk and polished smiles. The bride's side was overflowing, a noisy mix of college sorority sisters, marketing executives, and distant relatives who had flown in for the spectacle. They snapped selfies, checking the lighting, ensuring they were seen at the wedding of the year. The groom's side was pitifully sparse. A few colleagues from the architecture firm sat awkwardly, checking their watches. A couple of old college buddies whispered to each other, wondering why the turnout was so lopsided. The empty rows gaped like missing teeth in a smile. Mark stood in a small alcove to the side of the stage, hidden by a velvet curtain. He wasn't nervous. That was the strange thing. Usually, Mark was a ball of anxiety before a big presentation. Today, his heart rate was slow, steady, almost mechanical. He touched the pocket of his tuxedo jacket. The USB drive was gone. He had already handed it to Dave, the technician, 5 minutes ago. "Play it when I give the signal," Mark had said, pressing a $100 bill into Dave's hand along with the drive. "The signal is when I say the word perspective." Dave had looked confused but nodded. "Got it. Perspective." Now, Mark just had to wait. He peeked through the curtain. He scanned the back of the room. He wasn't looking for the bride. He was looking for a ghost. And then he saw her. The heavy double doors at the back of the hall creaked open, just a fraction. A small figure slipped inside. She was wearing a navy blue dress and a hat that had been fashionable 20 years ago. She moved with a hesitancy that broke his heart, clutching her handbag as if it were a shield. Eleanor. She didn't walk down the aisle. She didn't look for an usher. She immediately veered to the left, finding the darkest corner of the back row behind a massive pillar wrapped in tulle. She sat down on the edge of a folding chair, making herself as small as possible. Mark let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. She came. Part of him wanted to run down the aisle, grab her, and bring her to the front row where she belonged. But he couldn't. Not yet. The script had to play out. She had to see this. She needed to know that her son wasn't just a bystander in his own life. The string quartet began to play. The music was precise, beautiful, and utterly devoid of warmth. The ceremony began. Eleanor sat in the shadows, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide the tremor. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might fail her. She felt like an intruder, a criminal returning to the scene of a crime she didn't commit. She watched the guests. They looked so beautiful, so wealthy, so confident. She looked down at her own shoes, sensible, sturdy heels she had polished that morning. She felt a wave of shame. Mark was right. She didn't fit here. She was a relic of a simpler, quieter world. But she had to see him. Just once. The music swelled. The doors opened wide. First came the bridesmaids, a procession of clones in pale, icy blue. They walked with practiced strides, pausing for photos at the halfway point. Then the music changed. A dramatic orchestral swell filled the room. Jessica appeared. Eleanor had to admit she was breathtaking. The dress, the one Eleanor had been accused of ruining, had been repaired. The mermaid silhouette hugged her figure, the tulle exploding around her feet like foam. She wore a veil, but it wasn't the vintage lace. It was sheer, shimmering, and modern. Jessica glided down the aisle. She wasn't looking at Mark. She was looking at the phones, raised in the air. She was smiling at the cameras. She was performing. Eleanor craned her neck to see Mark. He stepped out from the curtain. He walked to the altar. He looked handsome, but he looked hard. His jaw was set in a line of granite. His eyes didn't have that soft, crinkly look they usually had when he was happy. He looked like a statue of himself. "Oh, Mark," Eleanor thought, tears pricking her eyes, "you look so lonely." She wanted to stand up. She wanted to shout, "I'm here! You're not alone!" But she stayed seated. She had promised. She was invisible. Jessica reached the altar. Mark stepped down to take her hand. Eleanor saw the interaction clearly. Jessica didn't look Mark in the eye. She turned to her maid of honor to hand off her bouquet, ensuring the flowers were angled correctly for the photographer. Then she turned to Mark, flashing a bright, teeth-baring smile that didn't reach her eyes. They stood before the officiant, a man with a polished voice who spoke about partnerships and journeys and building a brand together. It felt less like a wedding and more like a merger acquisition. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the officiant asked. "I do," Linda shouted from the front row, standing up and waving a champagne flute she had smuggled in. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Eleanor winced. The ceremony dragged on. There were readings from modern poetry that made no sense. There was a song performed by a hired soprano. Then it was time for the vows. "The couple has written their own vows," the officiant announced. "Jessica, you may begin." Jessica pulled a piece of cardstock from her bodice. She cleared her throat. A microphone was held up to her lips. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, "from the moment I met you, I knew you were the one who could handle me." The crowd chuckled. "I know I'm not easy," Jessica continued, smiling playfully. "I'm loud, I'm ambitious, and I know exactly what I want. People said I was too much, but you are my rock. You are the calm to my storm. You let me shine, you stand back and let me be the star I was born to be." Mark stood motionless. He stared at her forehead, avoiding her eyes. "I promise to let you carry my bags," Jessica joked, and the audience laughed again. "I promise to let you fix things around the house, and I promise that, together, we will build a life that everyone else is jealous of. You are my accessory, my partner, my love." She lowered the card. She wiped a tear that wasn't there. "Mark," the officiant prompted. It was Mark's turn. The room went silent. Eleanor leaned forward, holding her breath. Mark reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a card. He pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He didn't open it. He just held it. He looked at Jessica. For the first time all day, he really looked at her. He stepped closer to the microphone. "Jessica," Mark said. His voice was deep, steady, and amplified by the speakers. It echoed in the cavernous hall. "When we met, I thought you were the most vibrant person in the world. You had a light that drew everyone in, including me." Jessica smiled, preening slightly. She liked this start. "I wanted to be part of that light," Mark continued. "I was willing to change for it. I was willing to be quiet so you could be loud. I was willing to step back so you could step forward." He paused. The silence stretched a little too long. People started to shift in their seats. "But in the last few weeks," Mark said, his voice dropping a semitone, becoming colder, "I've learned a lot about light. I've learned that bright lights cast very long, very dark shadows, and things hide in those shadows, things we don't want to see." Jessica's smile faltered. A tiny frown creased her perfect forehead. This wasn't in the rehearsal. Mark took a step back from her. He looked out at the audience. He looked straight at the back of the room, toward the pillar, where Eleanor was hiding. Eleanor gasped softly. "Did he see me?" "I prepared some vows," Mark said, lifting the paper in his hand. "I wrote about love and compromise and future." He crumpled the paper in his fist. A collective gasp rippled through the room. "But vows are meaningless without truth," Mark said, "and a marriage cannot be built on a foundation of lies. Before I make a promise to you, Jessica, and before God and these witnesses, I think we need to gain a little perspective. Perspective. That was the signal. High above the altar, a massive projection screen began to descend from the ceiling. It hummed mechanically, a jarring sound in the tense silence. Jessica looked at the screen, then at Mark. She looked confused, but not scared yet. She whispered loudly, "Mark, what is this? Is this the montage? It's supposed to be later." "It's a special tribute," Mark said into the microphone, "to the woman who made this day possible." Jessica beamed. She thought it was a tribute to her, or maybe her mother. She turned to the audience and gave a little shrug, playing the surprised bride role. Eleanor, in the back, felt a surge of panic. "Oh no," she thought. "He's going to show photos of me. He's going to mock me too. He's going to show the world his clumsy mother to make Jessica laugh." She started to stand up. She wanted to run. She couldn't bear the humiliation. But the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The room plunged into darkness, save for the blue glow of the massive screen. The video began. There was no music, no romantic ballad, just the raw, static hiss of a security camera audio feed. Scene 1, the fitting room, Betrayal enactment via audio narration. Note: Mark didn't have a video of the shop, but he had the audio from Jessica's phone call. The screen showed a date and timestamp, Wednesday, 4:45 p.m. It was the footage from the penthouse living room. Jessica was pacing, phone in hand. The audio was crisp and loud. "No, Mom, you didn't see it. It was hilarious. I saw her hand shaking, and I just tweaked my shoulder." On the screen, Jessica made the jerking motion. She laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. Just a little jerk. Right. She looked so terrified, like a deer in headlights. A shockwave hit the audience. It was physical. People gasped. Someone dropped a glass. On the altar, Jessica froze. Her face went pale, the blood draining away, so fast she looked like a wax figure. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing. The video cut to the next clip. Scene 2. The garden invasion. The screen showed the timestamp, Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. 10. The angle was high, looking down from the kitchen camera into the living room. Jessica walked into the frame. She picked up the white box. She pulled out the heirloom veil. She put it on her head. She started to stumble around the room, shaking her hands violently. "Look at me. I'm Eleanor. I'm shaking. I'm so sad and lonely." The mockery was grotesque. It was amplified on the 20-foot screen. Every detail of her malice was magnified. In the audience, the laughter that usually accompanied Jessica's antics was dead. There was only a horrified silence. Eleanor, standing by the pillar, covered her mouth with both hands. Tears streamed down her face. Not tears of shame, but tears of shock. He saw. He knows. Scene 3. The confession. The video cut back to the penthouse. "I mean, honestly, I did her a favour. Now I get a brand new panel for free, and I get the perfect excuse to ban her. 2 birds, 1 stone. Oh, don't worry about Mark. I have him wrapped. He feels so guilty. He'll do anything I say." On the altar, Mark stood with his arms crossed, watching the screen. He wasn't looking at Jessica. He was letting the video speak for him. Jessica turned to Mark. She reached for his arm. "Mark, turn it off. It's out of context. It's a deep fake. Mark." Mark pulled his arm away. He didn't say a word. Scene 4. The truth. The screen went black for a second. The date changed. 3 days ago. The image showed Eleanor sitting alone in her living room. The rain was beating against the window. She was sewing the blue patch into the veil. Her hands were shaking, but she was focused. She wiped a tear from her cheek. Her voice, soft and raspy, filled the silent ballroom. "I love you, Mark. I love you enough to stay away, but I love you too much to let you live a lie forever." The image froze on Eleanor's face. a face full of sorrow and dignity. The video ended. The screen went black. The lights came up. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. No one moved. No one breathed. 500 people were staring at the bride. Jessica stood there. The veil she was wearing, the expensive modern one, suddenly looked cheap. Her makeup couldn't hide the ugliness that had just been exposed. She looked at the crowd. She saw judgment. She saw disgust. She turned to Mark. Her eyes were wild. "Mark," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage, not sorrow. "How could you? You humiliated me. On my day." Mark picked up the microphone again. "Your day?" Mark asked calmly. "You made it very clear that this day was a show, a production." "Well, Jessica, I just gave you the best twist ending you could ask for." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the ring, the platinum band he was supposed to put on her finger. He looked at it, then he looked at her. "You called my mother a liability," Mark said, his voice echoing. "You called her toxic, but the only toxic thing in this room is you." He dropped the ring. It hit the marble floor with a distinct ting. It rolled away, spinning on the ground, before coming to a rest at Jessica's feet. "I'm not marrying a brand, Jessica, and I'm certainly not marrying a bully." Mark turned to the officiant. "The wedding is off." Then he turned to the crowd. He scanned the faces until he found the pillar in the back. "Mom," he called out. His voice broke, just a little. "Mom, I know you're there." Every head in the room turned. 500 pairs of eyes searched the back of the hall. Eleanor felt her legs shaking. She wanted to sink into the floor, but she looked at her son. He was standing tall. He was waiting for her. Slowly, she stepped out from behind the pillar. A murmur went through the crowd. "There she is. That's the mother." But it wasn't a murmur of mockery. It was a sound of awe. They had seen the video. They had seen her grace in the face of cruelty. Mark stepped off the altar. He began to walk down the aisle. He wasn't walking away from the wedding. He was walking toward her. Jessica screamed, a primal tantrum scream. "Mark, get back here. You can't leave me. I have sponsors. I have a live stream." Mark didn't stop. He didn't even look back. He walked past the frozen bridesmaids. He walked past the shocked relatives. He walked past Linda, who was sitting with her mouth open, her champagne glass forgotten. He reached the back of the room. Eleanor stood there, clutching her handbag. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and wet. "I'm sorry," Mark whispered, his voice thick with tears. "I am so sorry. I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I left you alone." "It's okay," Eleanor whispered, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch his face. "You're here now." Mark took her hand. He kissed her knuckles, right over the tremor. "Let's go home, Mom," he said. "But—" Eleanor looked at the altar, where Jessica was now sobbing into her tulle, screaming at the cameraman to stop filming. "What about the reception? The food?" Mark smiled, a real smile. "I don't have an appetite for banquet food. How about pot roast?" Eleanor's face crumpled into a smile through her tears. "I can make that." Mark offered her his arm. "Lead the way." And then something extraordinary happened. As Mark and Eleanor turned to leave, walking out the double doors, a slow clapping started. It began with one of Mark's college friends. Then the groomsmen joined in. Then, surprisingly, some of the guests on the bride's side, people who had been secretly exhausted by Jessica's tyranny, started to clap. The applause grew. It wasn't a thunderous ovation, but a respectful, steady sound, a recognition of a truth. Eleanor walked out of the Grand Plaza ballroom on the arm of her son, her head held high. She wasn't the mother of the groom anymore. She was the woman who had won the war without firing a single shot. Behind them, the doors swung shut, sealing the chaos inside. The lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel was cool and quiet. a stark contrast to the pandemonium erupting inside the ballroom. Mark and Eleanor walked side by side. Mark had loosened his tie. Eleanor had taken off her hat. They walked past the concierge desk, past the fountain, toward the revolving doors. Mark, wait. They heard the clicking of heels sprinting across the marble floor. Mark stopped. He sighed, his shoulders dropping. He turned around. It wasn't Jessica. It was Linda, Jessica's mother. She was out of breath, her face flushed red, her fascinator hat askew. She looked furious. You, she pointed a manicured finger at Mark. You ungrateful, selfish little... She struggled for a word. Coward. Mark stepped in front of Eleanor, shielding her. Go back inside, Linda. You destroyed her, Linda screeched. Do you know how much this wedding cost? Do you know who was in that room? You've ruined her reputation. She's an influencer. This is social suicide. She ruined her own reputation, Mark said calmly. I just provided the projector. We will sue you, Linda spat. Defamation of character, emotional distress. We will take the house. We will take everything. Mark laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. The truth is an absolute defense against defamation, Linda, and I have the raw files. Hours of them. If you want to go to court, I'll be happy to release the rest of the footage. The parts where she talks about your friends behind their backs. The parts where she talks about stealing the wedding budget. Linda's mouth snapped shut. Her eyes widened. She knew her daughter. She knew what else might be on those tapes. That's what I thought, Mark said. Now, excuse us. My mother is tired. He turned his back on her. Eleanor, Linda called out, trying a different tactic. Eleanor, surely you can talk sense into him. You're a mother. You know how hard it is to see your child in pain. Jessica is just... She's young. She makes mistakes. Eleanor stopped. She looked back at Linda. For years, Linda had looked down on Eleanor. She had made fun of her clothes, her house, her tremor. Eleanor straightened her spine. She didn't look frail anymore. Linda, Eleanor said softly, my son is in pain too. The difference is, my son felt pain because he has a conscience. Your daughter felt pain because she got caught. She paused. And regarding the dress, Eleanor added, her voice steady, tell Jessica she should check the hemline. When she was stomping on my veil in the video, I believe she stepped on her own train. It looked like it ripped again. Eleanor turned and walked through the revolving doors. Mark followed her, a look of awe on his face. They stepped out into the blinding afternoon sun. The heat hit them like a physical wall, but it felt cleansing. It felt real. Did you just make that up? Mark asked as they walked toward the taxi stand, about the dress ripping again. Eleanor smiled mischievously. No, I saw it when she turned around to scream at you. Karma is a very efficient seamstress. Mark threw his head back and laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and releasing. It startled a pigeon on the sidewalk. I parked my car in the garage, Mark said, but I don't want to go back in there to get the ticket validated. Let's just take a cab. A cab is fine, Eleanor said. They hailed a taxi. It was an old sedan, smelling of pine, air freshener and cigarette smoke. It was a far cry from the vintage Rolls-Royce Mark had rented for the getaway car. They got in. Where to? The driver asked. Home, Mark said. Then he corrected himself. 42 Maple Street. Eleanor's address. The taxi pulled away from the curb. Mark looked out the rear window. He saw the Grand Plaza Hotel receding into the distance. He saw the life he had almost chosen, the life of crystal towers and cold perfection, disappearing. He felt a sudden crushing exhaustion. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the ache of a broken engagement and the wreckage of a 5-year relationship. He knew the next few weeks would be hell. There would be lawyers, bills, gossip. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. He felt a hand on his, a warm, shaking hand. He opened his eyes. Eleanor was holding his hand. "It will be okay," she said. "I made a mess, Mom," Mark whispered. "I wasted so much time. I hurt you." "You fixed it," Eleanor said. "That's what matters. You woke up." Mark looked at her hand. He watched the tremor. It wasn't scary anymore. It was just her. It was the rhythm of her life. "Mom?" "Yes." "That blue patch," Mark said, "on the veil. It was my shirt, wasn't it?" Eleanor nodded. "The one from the debate championship. Your lucky shirt." Mark squeezed her hand. Tears leaked out of the corners of his eyes again. "You saved me, you and that veil." "We're a team," Eleanor said. The taxi merged onto the highway, heading towards the suburbs. The skyline of the city, sharp and jagged, was left behind. Ahead lay the soft, rolling green of the older neighborhoods. Inside the hotel, the chaos was just beginning. Phones were blowing up. The video was probably already trending on TikTok. Jessica's brand was imploding in real time, but in the taxi there was only silence, a companionable, healing silence. Mark took his phone out of his pocket. It was buzzing with texts from Jessica, from Chloe, from guests. Jessica, 10 missed calls. Chloe, "Mark, the caterers are asking what to do with the lobster." Unknown, "Dude, that was insane. Respect." Mark held the button on the side of the phone. Power off. The screen went black. He put the phone away. "So," Mark said, looking at his mother, "do we have carrots for the roast? Or do we need to stop at the store?" Eleanor smiled. "I have carrots, but we might need some ice cream for dessert." "Ice cream sounds perfect," Mark said. The taxi drove on. The taxi pulled up to the curb of 42 Maple Street just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. It was the golden hour, the time of day when the world looks softest. But to Mark, everything looked sharp and hyper-real. He paid the driver with a credit card that felt heavy in his hand. It was the card from the joint account he shared with Jessica. He made a mental note to cancel it in the morning. Mark stepped out onto the sidewalk. He took a deep breath. The air here didn't smell of asphalt and expensive lilies. It smelled of cut grass, damp earth, and the faint, sweet scent of jasmine from Mrs. Gable's porch next door. He opened the back door for his mother. Eleanor stepped out, moving slowly. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the showdown in the ballroom was fading, replaced by the bone-deep fatigue of her condition. "We're home," Eleanor whispered, looking at the small bungalow. It looked different to Mark now. For years, he had seen this house as a relic, a place that was too small, too old, too cluttered with memories he wanted to outgrow. Now, seeing it through the lens of the last few hours, it looked like a fortress. It was the only place in the world that hadn't lied to him. "Let's get inside," Mark said. He carried the grocery bag, vanilla ice cream, a bag of carrots, and a bottle of cheap red wine they had picked up at the corner store. They walked up the driveway. Mark stopped at the side gate. He saw the latch. It was still bent. He saw the grass, trampled and muddy, where the bridesmaid's table had been. He saw the rose bush, its leaves brown and sticky from the champagne. He stood there, staring at the mud. The video footage he had edited was one thing. Seeing the physical scars on his mother's sanctuary was another. It made the violation feel tactile. "I'll fix the grass," Mark said, his voice tight. "I'll resod the whole lawn if I have to." "It will grow back, Mark," Eleanor said gently, touching his arm. Grass is resilient, just like people. They went inside. The house was warm. The air was still thick with the silence Eleanor had lived in for years. Mark placed the groceries on the kitchen counter. He looked around. He saw the dirty footprints near the back door, faint but visible. Jessica's footprints. He grabbed the mop from the corner. "Mark, you don't have to." "I do," Mark interrupted. He didn't take off his tuxedo jacket. He turned on the tap, filled the bucket with hot soapy water, and started scrubbing. He scrubbed with a ferocity that had nothing to do with dirt. He was scrubbing away the memory of Jessica standing in this kitchen, mocking his mother. He was scrubbing away his own blindness. Back and forth, the mop slapped against the linoleum. Eleanor watched him for a moment, understanding. She didn't stop him, but she simply took her apron from the hook, the floral one with the frayed strings, and tied it over her silk dress. "I'll start the roast," she said. For the next hour they worked in a synchronized silence. It was a dance they hadn't performed in a decade. Mark cleaned the floors, then went out to the yard to straighten the gnome and rake the debris. Eleanor peeled potatoes, her hands shaking, but finding their rhythm in the familiar task. The smell of searing beef and onions began to fill the house, chasing away the stale scent of Jessica's perfume. It was a primal, grounding smell. It smelled like safety. When the roast was in the oven, simmering slowly, Mark finally sat down at the kitchen table. He took off his jacket and hung it on the back of the chair. He rolled up his sleeves. He looked at his mother. She was sitting opposite him, a glass of water in her hand. She looked pale, her skin almost translucent under the kitchen light. "You okay?" Mark asked. "I'm tired," Eleanor admitted. "My tremor is bad tonight. Stress makes it flare up." "I'm sorry," Mark said. It was the 100th time he had thought it, but saying it still felt inadequate. "Mark, stop." Eleanor put her glass down. "You apologized in the car. You apologized in the hallway. You don't need to apologize for the rest of your life." "I feel like I do. I left you alone, Mum. I let her treat you like garbage. You didn't know." "I should have known," Mark insisted. "I should have seen it. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me and say, 'Mark, your fiancé is a monster'?" Eleanor smiled sadly. She traced the rim of her glass with a finger. "Because you were in love," she said simply, "or you thought you were. If I had told you, you would have defended her. You would have thought I was being a jealous old mother-in-law. Jessica had already planted that seed in your head, hadn't she? That I was clingy? That I was difficult?" Mark looked down at the table. "Yeah, she did. Exactly. If I had fought her, I would have lost you completely. She was waiting for me to snap. She wanted a reaction. The only way to win was to stay silent and let her show her true colours." Mark shook his head in disbelief. "You gambled everything. You gambled that I would find out on my own." "I didn't gamble on you finding out," Eleanor said, her eyes locking onto his. "I gambled on who I raised. I knew that eventually the Mark who cried when he found a hurt bird in the garden, I knew that Mark would wake up. I just had to wait." Mark felt a lump in his throat. The faith she had in him was crushing in its weight, yet lifting in its grace. "I saw the camera," Mark said abruptly. "The one in the living room. I saw you talking to Dad's photo." Eleanor flinched slightly. That was a private moment. "I heard what you said," Mark continued, his voice trembling, "about disappearing, about fading away." He reached across the table and took her hands. He held them firmly, stopping the tremor with his own strength. "You are not disappearing, Mum. I see you. I am here. I am not going anywhere." Eleanor looked at their joined hands. A single tear slid down her nose. "I know." The oven timer dinged, a cheerful mechanical sound that broke the heavy atmosphere. "Dinner," Eleanor said, pulling her hands back to wipe her face. "We have to eat." They set the table. Not the dining room table with the formal cloth, but the small round table in the kitchen nook. They ate pot roast with carrots and potatoes. It wasn't the artisanal, deconstructed food of the wedding banquet. It was soft, salty, and warm. Mark ate like a starving man. He realised he hadn't eaten a real meal in weeks. Jessica had them on a strict wedding prep diet of kale juices and lean protein. The taste of the gravy felt like rebellion. "So," Eleanor said, trying to lighten the mood, "what happens now? The wedding is cancelled." "Exploded is more like it." Mark chewed a piece of carrot. "I turned my phone off, but I can imagine the fallout. We put a deposit on the apartment. That's probably gone. The honeymoon tickets are non-refundable." "Money comes and goes." Eleanor waved a fork. "The legal stuff will be messy," Mark mused. "Jessica isn't the type to go quietly. She'll want revenge. She'll try to spin this. She'll say the video was edited, or that I abused her." "Let her try," Eleanor said, a flash of steel returning to her eyes. "You have the raw files, don't you?" "I do." "Then you have the truth, and the truth is a stubborn thing. It doesn't care about spin." Mark nodded. He felt a strange calm. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of conflict. He had spent 5 years walking on eggshells around Jessica, terrified of her moods, her judgment, her public image. Now, the worst had happened. The bomb had gone off, and he was still standing. He stood up to clear the plates. "I'm going to get the ice cream." He opened the freezer. He took out the carton of vanilla. He looked for the scoop. "Third drawer down," Eleanor reminded him. He found it. He scooped 2 bowls. They ate the ice cream in silence. It was melting quickly in the warm kitchen. "Mom," Mark said after a while. "Yes?" "I want to ask you something about the veil." Eleanor looked up. "What about it?" "When you sewed the patch on the blue patch, you knew I would see it. You looked right at the camera." "I hoped you would see it," she corrected. "I didn't know if you ever checked those cameras, but I knew that if you did, it meant you were looking for me. It meant you were worried." "I was checking to see if you fell," Mark admitted. "I was checking out of guilt. Guilt is a powerful motivator. It brought you home." Mark finished his ice cream. He put the bowl in the sink. "I'm going to stay here tonight," he said. "If that's okay. I don't want to go back to the penthouse. Jessica might be there." "This is your home, Mark. Your room is exactly how you left it, although—" Eleanor hesitated. "I think I turned it into a storage room for my yarn. There might be wool on the bed." Mark laughed. "I can sleep on wool. It's better than sleeping on lies." Later that night, Mark lay in his childhood bed. The room smelled of cedar and old paper. The walls were still covered with posters of bands he hadn't listened to in 15 years. There were boxes of yarn stacked in the corner, colourful mountains of wool that represented hours of his mother's solitude. He couldn't sleep. He reached for his phone on the nightstand. It was still off. He knew he shouldn't. He knew he should just sleep and deal with the world tomorrow. But the curiosity was an itch he couldn't scratch. He turned the phone on. It buzzed instantly. A flood of notifications caused the device to vibrate violently in his hand for a full minute. 47 voicemails. 112 text messages. Twitter, "You are trending." TikTok, "You are trending." He ignored the texts from Jessica. He ignored the texts from Linda. He opened Twitter. The number 1 trending topic in the country was #the veil. The number 2 topic was #RunMarkRun. He clicked on the hashtag. Someone had recorded the ceremony. Of course they had. It was a room full of influencers. The video of his speech, the projection screen, and the walkout was everywhere. He watched a clip posted by someone named Sarah Stiles, one of Jessica's friends. The caption read, "OMFG, I cannot believe I just witnessed this. Jessica is over." To Team Mark all the way. He scrolled through the comments. Dude dropped the ring like a mic drop. Legend. The mum sewing the patch. I am sobbing. That bride is a psycho. Who makes fun of Parkinson's? Disgusting. I hope she gets sued into oblivion. This is the best wedding video I have ever seen. Mark felt a strange dissociation. They were talking about him. They were talking about his life as if it were a movie. But amidst the noise, he saw something else. People were sharing photos of their own heirlooms. My grandma's veil from 1960. I'd never let anyone disrespect it. Sewing a patch for my son today. Mothers show love in quiet ways. The story had transcended the drama. It had touched a nerve. It wasn't just about a bad bride. It was about the dignity of the elderly, the value of tradition, and the sacred bond between parent and child. Mark put the phone down. He felt a sense of vindication, yes, but mostly he felt relief that the internet, usually a place of toxicity, had actually sided with the truth. Jessica's carefully curated brand, built on aesthetics and perfection, had been dismantled by a grainy, black and white security video. Real life had defeated the aesthetic. He heard a sound from the hallway, footsteps. He got out of bed and opened the door. Eleanor was standing in the hallway, wearing her bathrobe. She was holding a glass of water. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "No, the internet is loud." "Don't read it," she advised. "It's just noise. Tomorrow they'll be talking about a cat playing a piano. Fame is fleeting." "They love you, Mum," Mark said. "They're calling you a hero." Eleanor snorted. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a seamstress who didn't want her son to marry a witch." Mark smiled. "Can I get you anything?" "No, I wanted to check the lock on the front door. I know I locked it, but I just wanted to check." "I checked it," Mark said, "and the back door, and the windows. We're safe." Eleanor nodded. She looked small in the dark hallway. "Mark?" "Yeah." "You know, I didn't actually hate the girl at first. I really tried. When you first brought her home, I thought she was vibrant. I thought she would bring some life into this old house." "She brought life, all right," Mark muttered. "Just the wrong kind." "I'm going to get the ice cream." He opened the freezer. He took out the carton of vanilla. He looked for the scoop. "Third drawer down," Eleanor reminded him. He found it. He scooped 2 bowls. They ate the ice cream in silence. It was melting quickly in the warm kitchen. "Mum," Mark said after a while. "Yes?" "I want to ask you something about the veil." Eleanor looked up. "What about it?" "When you sewed the patch on, the blue patch, you knew I would see it. You looked right at the camera." "I hoped you would see it," she corrected. "I didn't know if you ever checked those cameras, but I knew that if you did, it meant you were looking for me. It meant you were worried." "I was checking to see if you fell," Mark admitted. "I was checking out of guilt. Guilt is a powerful motivator. It brought you home." Mark finished his ice cream. He put the bowl in the sink. "I'm going to stay here tonight," he said. "If that's okay. I don't want to go back to the penthouse. Jessica might be there." "This is your home, Mark. Your room is exactly how you left it. Although," Eleanor hesitated, "I think I turned it into a storage room for my yarn. There might be wool on the bed." Mark laughed. "I can sleep on wool. It's better than sleeping on lies." Later that night, Mark lay in his childhood bed. The room smelled of cedar and old paper. The walls were still covered with posters of bands he hadn't listened to in 15 years. There were boxes of yarn stacked in the corner, colourful mountains of wool that represented hours of his mother's solitude. He couldn't sleep. He reached for his phone on the nightstand. It was still off. He knew he shouldn't. He knew he should just sleep and deal with the world tomorrow. But the curiosity was an itch he couldn't scratch. He turned the phone on. It buzzed instantly. A flood of notifications caused the device to vibrate violently in his hand for a full minute. 47 voicemails. 112 text messages. Twitter, you are trending. TikTok, you are trending. He ignored the texts from Jessica. He ignored the texts from Linda. He opened Twitter. The number one trending topic in the country was hashtag the veil. The number two topic was #run Mark run. He clicked on the hashtag. Someone had recorded the ceremony. Of course they had. It was a room full of influencers. The video of his speech, the projection screen, and the walkout was everywhere. He watched a clip posted by someone named @SarahStyles, one of Jessica's friends. The caption read, "OMFG. I cannot believe I just witnessed this. Jessica is over. Team Mark all the way." He scrolled through the comments. Dude dropped the ring like a mic drop. Legend. The mom sewing the patch. I am sobbing. That bride is a psycho. Who makes fun of Parkinson's? Disgusting. I hope she gets sued into oblivion. This is the best wedding video I have ever seen. Mark felt a strange dissociation. They were talking about him. They were talking about his life as if it were a movie. But amidst the noise, he saw something else. People were sharing photos of their own heirlooms. My grandma's veil from 1960. I'd never let anyone disrespect it. Sewing a patch for my son today. Mothers show love in quiet ways. The story had transcended the drama. It had touched a nerve. It wasn't just about a bad bride. It was about the dignity of the elderly, the value of tradition, and the sacred bond between parent and child. Mark put the phone down. He felt a sense of vindication, yes, but mostly he felt relief that the internet, usually a place of toxicity, had actually sided with the truth. Jessica's carefully curated brand, built on aesthetics and perfection, had been dismantled by a grainy, black and white security video. Real life had defeated the aesthetic. He heard a sound from the hallway. Footsteps. He got out of bed and opened the door. Eleanor was standing in the hallway, wearing her bathrobe. She was holding a glass of water. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "No, the internet is loud." "Don't read it," she advised. "It's just noise. Tomorrow they'll be talking about a cat playing a piano. Fame is fleeting." "They love you, Mum," Mark said. "They're calling you a hero." Eleanor snorted. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a seamstress who didn't want her son to marry a witch." Mark smiled. "Can I get you anything?" "No, I wanted to check the lock on the front door. I know I locked it, but I just wanted to check." "I checked it," Mark said, "and the back door and the windows. We're safe." Eleanor nodded. She looked small in the dark hallway. "Mark, yeah? You know, I didn't actually hate the girl at first. I really tried. When you first brought her home, I thought she was vibrant. I thought she would bring some life into this old house." "She brought life, all right," Mark muttered. "Just the wrong kind." "I think she was lonely too," Eleanor said, her voice thoughtful. "People who need that much attention, they have a hole inside them, a bucket with no bottom. You can pour love in, and money, and praise, but it never fills up. I feel sorry for her." Mark looked at his mother in amazement. After everything, the mockery, the cruelty, the banishment, she felt pity. "You're a better person than I am," Mark said. "I don't feel sorry for her. Not yet." "You will," Eleanor said. "Hate is too heavy to carry, Mark. It shakes you apart. I shake enough as it is. I don't need the extra weight." She turned to go back to her room. "Good night, Mark." "Good night, Mum." Mark watched her close her door. Hate is too heavy to carry. He went back to his room. He looked at the yarn piled in the corner. He picked up a skein of blue wool. It was soft, tangled, and real. He lay back down. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. Jessica wouldn't take this lying down. There would be lawyers. There would be attempts to salvage her career. She might even try to come here, but for tonight, the house was quiet. The gate was latched. The roast was eaten. Mark closed his eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The first real rest he had had in 6 months. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak tree. The nanny cam in the living room blinked its red light, watching over the empty sofa, recording the piece that had finally returned to 42 Maple Street. The morning after the wedding did not bring peace. It brought a digital siege. Mark woke up on the single bed in his childhood room. For a moment, looking at the ceiling fan spinning slowly, he forgot. He thought he was 16 again, worrying about a math test. Then the vibration of his phone on the nightstand brought him back to reality. He picked it up. The battery was at 12%. He had forgotten to charge it. He turned on the Wi-Fi. The notifications cascaded down the screen like a waterfall, but the tone had shifted. Yesterday, the internet was cheering for the hero mum. Today, the narrative was getting muddy. Mark opened YouTube. A video was trending in the top 10. The thumbnail showed Jessica, looking pale, wearing a modest grey sweater, no makeup, wiping a tear from her eye. The title was My Truth: Surviving a Toxic Relationship. Mark sat up, his stomach churning. He pressed play. Jessica spoke softly into the camera, her voice breaking perfectly at the end of every sentence. "I didn't want to make this video," she whispered, "but I can't stay silent while my character is assassinated. The video you saw at the wedding, it was edited. It was taken out of context. I was rehearsing for a play, an acting workshop. Mark knew that." She paused, looking down at her hands. "Mark has always been controlling. He was jealous of my career. And his mother, she has a condition, yes, and I have always been supportive. But she was obsessed with him. She made me feel unsafe in my own home. I was reacting to months of abuse, and now they have weaponized my trauma against me." Mark threw the phone onto the duvet. It was brilliant. It was evil. She was using the victim card to flip the script. She was gaslighting the entire world. He heard the kettle whistling in the kitchen. He got up, dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, and went downstairs. Eleanor was at the stove, making oatmeal. She looked rested, though her movements were still slow. She hadn't seen the video yet. "Good morning," she said, turning with a smile. "Coffee?" "Yeah," Mark said, rubbing his face. "Mum, don't look at the internet today, okay? Just don't." Eleanor's smile faded. She responded, "She's lying. She's claiming the footage was an acting exercise. She's claiming we abused her." Eleanor sighed, turning back to the oatmeal. "A lie travels halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes." Mark Twain said that. Or maybe it was Churchill. Someone smart. "We need to stop her," Mark said, pacing the kitchen. "People are starting to believe her. I'm seeing comments saying I'm a misogynist for publicly humiliating her." "Mark," Eleanor said firmly, "sit down. Eat your breakfast." "I can't eat. She's going to sue us. She's going to come after the house. She can't take the house. It's in my name, and I'm not selling." Mark sat down, but his leg bounced nervously under the table. He needed ammunition. The video was emotional proof, but he needed something concrete, something legal. He thought about Jessica's threat in the car yesterday. "I have sponsors." He thought about the wedding budget. It had ballooned in the last 3 months. Emergency costs, she had called them. Mark stood up. "I need to use your computer, the desktop in the den." "It's slow," Eleanor warned. "It runs on coal and patience." Mark ran to the den. The old PC hummed loudly as he booted it up. He opened the browser and logged into his bank account. He went to the joint savings account, the one titled Future Home. It should have had $80,000 in it, his inheritance from his father, plus his savings from 5 years of work. He clicked on the balance. 412 Hassan. Mark stared at the screen. The air left his lungs. He clicked on transaction history. Transfer to JL. Consulting. $15,000. Transfer to JL. Consulting. $10,000. Transfer to Luxbot followers. $5,000. Withdrawal. Cash. $2,000. The list went on. For months. Every time he deposited a paycheck, she siphoned it out. JL. Consulting, Mark whispered. He searched the business registry database. It was a public record. JL. Consulting. Registered agent. Linda Miller. Address. 550 Park Avenue. Linda's apartment. They were stealing from him. Jessica and her mother had set up a shell company and were draining his life savings to pay themselves. And the Luxbot charge? She was buying fake followers. She was using his down payment money to buy her popularity. Oh my God, Mark exhaled. This wasn't just a bad breakup. This was grand larceny. This was embezzlement. He printed the statements. The old printer groaned and squeaked, spitting out page after page of evidence. Just as the last page fell into the tray, he heard a car door slam outside, then another. He heard Eleanor's voice from the kitchen, high and alarmed. "You can't come in here. Get out of my way, Eleanor." It was Jessica. Mark grabbed the stack of papers. He ran to the hallway. The front door was open. Jessica stood in the entryway. She wasn't wearing the sad grey sweater from the YouTube video. She was wearing designer sunglasses and a sharp red blazer. She looked like a shark that smelled blood. Behind her stood Linda, holding a leather portfolio. "Where is he?" Jessica demanded, pushing past Eleanor. "I'm right here," Mark said, stepping into the hallway. His voice was ice cold. Jessica took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, maybe from crying, maybe from lack of sleep, but they were hard. "You think you're smart, Mark," she hissed. "You think you can humiliate me and walk away? I just got off the phone with my lawyer. We are suing you for emotional distress, defamation, and breach of promise. We are going to sue you for every penny you have. And this dump," Linda added, looking around the hallway with a sneer, "will take this house as a compensation for the pain you caused." Eleanor leaned against the wall, clutching her apron. Her hand was shaking violently. "Get out of my house," Eleanor said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. "Shut up, old woman," Jessica snapped. "This doesn't concern you." Mark stepped forward. He moved fast. He stood directly in front of Jessica, towering over her. For the first time, he used his size not to protect her, but to intimidate her. "Don't you dare speak to her," Mark said. "Or what?" Jessica challenged. "You'll play another video? Go ahead. My fans are already rallying. They know you're an abuser." "Is that what you're telling them?" Mark asked. "That I abused you?" "Emotional abuse is real, Mark. And what you did yesterday was violence." Mark looked at Linda. "And you? You're here to support your daughter." "I'm here to make sure she gets what she's owed," Linda said haughtily. "She invested 5 years in you. She built your image. She deserves a return on investment." "Return on investment," Mark repeated. He looked at the papers in his hand. "Funny you should say that." He threw the stack of papers into the air. They fluttered down like confetti, landing on the floor between them. Bank statements, transaction records, the business registration for JL Consulting. Jessica looked down. She saw the highlighted line, transfer to JL Consulting, $15,000. Her face changed. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a flash of genuine terror. What is this? Linda asked, her voice squeaking. That, Mark pointed to the floor, is proof of embezzlement, grand larceny, wire fraud. He took a step closer to Jessica. I know about the shell company, Jess. I know you and your mother have been draining the house fund. $80,000. Stolen. It was for the wedding, Jessica stammered, backing away. Consulting fees. My mum helped plan the wedding. She's a consultant. Did she declare it on her taxes? Mark asked. Did you have a contract, or did you just siphon my inheritance to pay for your bot farms and your mother's gambling debts? Linda went pale. How dare you? I'm not suing you, Jessica, Mark said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I'm calling the FBI. This is interstate wire fraud. That's a federal crime. You're not looking at a lawsuit. You're looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. The silence in the hallway was deafening. The only sound was the humming of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Jessica looked at Linda. Linda looked at the door. Mark, baby. Jessica's voice changed instantly. It became the sweet, cooing voice she used when she wanted something. She reached out to touch his chest. Let's not be dramatic. We can work this out. It was a misunderstanding. I was going to put it back. Mark caught her wrist. He removed her hand from his chest as if it were a piece of trash. Don't touch me. He turned to Eleanor. Mum, do you want them in your house? Eleanor stepped forward. She looked at the two women who had terrorized her for months. She looked at the muddy footprints they had tracked onto her clean floor. No, Eleanor said. I want them gone. Mark turned back to Jessica. You have 5 minutes to leave. If you're not off the property in 5 minutes, I call the police. And Jessica? Jessica looked up, tears of real panic streaming down her face now. Take down the video, Mark said, and post a retraction. Admit you lied. If you don't, I hand this file to the district attorney by noon. Jessica nodded frantically. Okay, I will. Go. Jessica turned and ran. She tripped over her own heels in the driveway, but didn't stop. Linda scrambled after her, clutching her portfolio, looking like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Mark slammed the front door. The sound echoed through the house. Finality. He leaned his forehead against the wood, breathing hard. His hands were shaking now. The adrenaline dump was intense. He felt a hand on his back. You did it, Eleanor whispered. Mark turned around and slid down the door until he was sitting on the floor. Eleanor sat down next to him, ignoring her bad knees. They sat there in the hallway, surrounded by the scattered bank statements. I lost the money, Mum, Mark said, his voice cracking. The 80,000, it's gone. Dad's money. I let her steal it. He buried his face in his hands. The shame was hotter than the anger. He had failed to protect his father's legacy. Eleanor put her arm around his shoulders. Mark, look at me. He looked up. Your father didn't leave you that money so you could buy a house, Eleanor said. He left it so you could have a life. Money can be earned back. You're an architect. You're talented. You're young. But it was his sacrifice. His sacrifice was for you to be happy, Eleanor said fiercely. If spending that money was the price to pay to get rid of her, to wake you up, then it was the best investment Robert ever made. Mark laughed through his tears. It was a watery, painful sound. That's an expensive breakup. Freedom is always expensive, Eleanor said. That's why it's valuable. Mark picked up a bank statement from the floor. He crumpled it into a ball. I'm going to press charges, Mark said. She needs to face consequences. Eleanor paused. She looked at the sunlight streaming through the dusty window above the door. You can, she said, and you would be right. But ask yourself, Mark, do you want to spend the next 2 years in court, seeing her face every day, letting her live in your head? Mark thought about it. He thought about depositions, lawyers, the media circus. What do you suggest? Make sure she pays you back, Eleanor said. Make her sell her car, her bags, whatever she has. Get what you can, but don't let her steal your time. She's already stolen 5 years. Don't give her 5 more. Mark nodded slowly. His mother, as always, was playing the long game, the game of peace. Okay, Mark said, I'll get the retraction. I'll get a settlement. And then I'll block her. That sounds like a plan. Eleanor struggled to get up. Mark jumped up to help her. My knees are protesting, she groaned, but she was smiling. All this drama is bad for my arthritis. I'll make some tea, Mark said. No, Eleanor said, looking toward the living room. I have a better idea. The grass in the backyard is ruined, but the weather is beautiful. So I think we should go out there and plant something new, right now, over the mud. Mark looked at his mother. She was frail, yes. She was shaking, yes, but she was rebuilding, immediately. I think there are some wildflower seeds in the shed, Mark remembered. Perfect, Eleanor said. Wildflowers are tough. They grow anywhere. They spent the afternoon in the garden. Mark turned the soil, burying the champagne-soaked earth. Eleanor sprinkled the seeds. It was messy work. They got dirt on their clothes. They sweated. But for the first time in months, the nanny cam in the living room recorded nothing but an empty house. The life was happening outside, unrecorded, unperformative, and real. By evening, Jessica's retraction video was up. It was short, text only, posted on Instagram stories. I apologize for my previous statements. Emotions were high. We have decided to separate amicably. It was a weak apology, but it was enough to kill the story. Okay, the internet moved on to the next scandal. Mark sat on the back porch steps as the sun went down. The soil was fresh and dark. He was broke. He was single. He was living with his mother at 30. He had never felt richer. Mark, Eleanor called from the kitchen, do we have any wine left, or did we drink it all? I think there's a glass left, Mark called back. Good. Bring it here. We need to toast. Mark went inside. The storm was over. The wreckage was cleared, but the story wasn't quite done. There was one final loose thread, a thread that tied back to the very beginning. The veil. It was still in the white box on the coffee table, the object that had started the war. Mark looked at it. Mum, he asked, pouring the wine, what are we going to do with the veil? You can't exactly give it to Jessica now. Eleanor took the glass. She looked at the box. No, she said, but it served its purpose. It revealed the truth. It's not just a veil anymore, Mark. It's a detector. She laughed. Maybe I'll frame it, Mark suggested. Hang it in the hallway as a warning to future girlfriends. Oh, God forbid, Eleanor chuckled. No, we'll clean it. We'll wrap it in fresh tissue, and we'll put it back in the closet. For who? Eleanor looked at Mark. Her eyes were soft. For the girl who sees the blue patch and asks, why is there a piece of flannel on this beautiful lace, instead of, why is it so old? Mark smiled. He understood. The girl who asks the right questions, Mark said. Exactly. They clinked glasses. To the truth, Eleanor said. To the truth, Mark replied, and in the silence that followed, the house felt full, not with people, but with the absence of lies. 1 year later, spring had arrived in the suburbs, not with a polite knock, but with a riotous explosion of life. The backyard of 42 Maple Street, once the site of a muddy, champagne-soaked disaster, was unrecognisable. It was no longer a manicured lawn. It was a meadow. The wildflower seeds that Eleanor and Mark had planted in their anger had grown into a chaotic, joyful tapestry of poppies, cornflowers, and daisies. Bees hummed in the air. A sound of industry and peace. Mark sat on the back porch, sanding a piece of wood. He was wearing an old t-shirt covered in sawdust. He looked different. The tightness around his eyes was gone. He had grown a beard, which gave him a rugged, relaxed look. He no longer looked like a corporate architect trying to impress a client. He looked like a man building a home. He wasn't working at the high-rise firm anymore. He had quit 3 months after the wedding that wasn't. He had started his own small practice, specializing in restoration. He fixed old houses. He took broken, forgotten structures and gave them new life, preserving their scars rather than covering them up with drywall. It paid less. He drove a used truck, but he slept at night. The screen door squeaked open. Eleanor stepped out, carrying a tray with 2 glasses of iced tea. She moved slower now. The year had taken a toll on her mobility. Her shuffle was more pronounced, and the tremor in her right hand was a constant companion, a hummingbird that never landed, but her eyes were bright. "Break time," she announced, setting the tray down on the small patio table. Mark put down his sandpaper. He stood up and pulled a chair out for her. "Thanks, Mom. You didn't have to carry that." "I'm shaking, Mark, not paralyzed," she teased gently. "Besides, the ice cubes clinking against the glass make a nice music." They sat together, overlooking the wild garden. "It's a jungle out there," Mark laughed, gesturing to the flowers. "The neighbours probably hate it. It ruins the property value of their manicured lawns." "Mrs. Gable next door told me it's her favourite view," Eleanor corrected him. "She says it looks like a painting. Perfection is boring, Mark. It's the mess that's interesting." Mark took a sip of tea. "Speaking of mess, I got a letter today." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "From the lawyer. The settlement is finalised." Eleanor didn't ask the details. She waited. "I'm getting about 10 cents on the dollar for the stolen money," Mark said with a shrug. "It's enough to fix the roof. The rest is gone. Jessica, well, she'd declared bankruptcy. Her brand is dead. She's working as a receptionist at a gym in another state." "Do you feel happy about that?" Eleanor asked. Mark thought about it. He looked at the blue sky. "No," he said honestly. "I don't feel happy. I don't feel sad. I just feel light. It's like putting down a heavy backpack I didn't know I was carrying." "That's forgiveness," Eleanor said, "or at least indifference, which is close enough." Mark picked up the piece of wood he was working on. It was a base for a sculpture. "Mom, I have a surprise for you, for the anniversary." "The anniversary of what? The day you almost made a terrible mistake?" Eleanor chuckled. "Let's call it Independence Day," Mark smiled. "Wait here." He went into the shed. He came out holding something wrapped in a cloth. He placed it on the table. "Open it." Eleanor unwrapped the cloth. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the garden gnome, the one with the red hat that the bridesmaid had broken, the one Eleanor had tried to glue back together with her shaking hands, but it looked different. The crack running down the gnome's hat and face was still there, but Mark hadn't tried to hide it. Instead, he had filled the crack with a vein of shimmering gold lacquer. The scar wasn't a flaw anymore. It was the most beautiful part of the statue. It caught the sunlight, glittering like a lightning bolt. It's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, running a finger over the gold line. "It's called kintsugi," Mark explained. "It's a Japanese art form. They repair broken pottery with gold. The philosophy is that the break is part of the object's history. It shouldn't be disguised. It makes the object unique, more valuable." Eleanor looked at the gnome, then at her own trembling hands. She looked at Mark, who had been broken by betrayal and put back together by truth. "We are all a little broken, aren't we?" she said softly. "Yeah," Mark said, "but that's where the light gets in." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a smaller box. "And one more thing." He opened the box. Inside was a smartphone, a new one, with a large, easy-to-read screen. "I know you hate technology," Mark said, "but I set this up for you. No social media, no toxic comments, just one app. He tapped the screen. An icon appeared. It was a video call app. I have a consultation next week, Mark said, looking a bit shy. In London. A historical society wants me to look at an old library. Eleanor's eyes widened. London? Mark, that's wonderful. It's a big job. If I get it, I might be gone for a month. Panic flickered in Eleanor's eyes for a microsecond, then vanished. I'll be fine, she said quickly. I have the garden. I have Mrs. Gable. I know you'll be fine, Mark said, but I want you to come with me. Eleanor froze. Me? Mark? Look at me. I can barely walk to the mailbox. I'd be a burden. I'd slow you down. Mum, Mark leaned forward. Do you remember what Jessica said? That you were a liability. Eleanor looked down. The word still stung. You believed her, Mark said, and for a while I did too. But look at us. Who saved who? You're not a liability, Mum. You're my foundation. He tapped the gold scar on the gnome. We'll rent a wheelchair for the long days. We'll take slow walks. We'll drink tea and judge the British weather. I'm not going without you. I want to see you in London. I want to take a picture of you in front of Buckingham Palace, shaking and all. Eleanor looked at her son. She saw the man he had become, a man of substance. A wheelchair? She asked, feigning annoyance. Does it have racing stripes? Mark grinned. I'll paint some on, maybe some gold ones. Eleanor laughed. It was a full, deep laugh that startled the bees. Okay, she said. Okay, let's go to London. Mark stood up and kissed her forehead. I'll go book the tickets. Business class. We're spending the inheritance the right way this time. He walked back into the house, whistling. Eleanor stayed on the porch. She looked at the gnome with its golden scar. She looked at the wild meadow. She thought about the veil tucked away in the closet upstairs. It was safe. It was waiting. Maybe one day Mark would meet someone in London, someone who liked old books and didn't mind a mother-in-law who spilled tea. Or maybe not. It didn't matter. The future wasn't a frantic race anymore. It was a slow walk. She picked up her iced tea. Her hand shook, sending ripples across the surface of the liquid. The ice cubes clinked, a tiny chaotic melody. She didn't try to stop the shaking. She just held the glass, watching the ripples catch the light, turning the movement into a dance. She looked toward the living room window. She knew the camera was there. For months, that camera had been a witness to her pain. It had been a weapon of truth, but they didn't need a witness anymore. Eleanor stood up, leaving the golden gnome on the table. She walked inside. She went to the living room. She reached up to the shelf where the camera sat. The red light was blinking, recording. She looked into the lens. She smiled, a genuine private smile that belonged only to her. End of story, she whispered. She reached behind the device and pulled the plug. The red light blinked once and then went dark. The house was silent. But it wasn't empty. It was full of life, unrecorded and imperfect, just waiting to be lived.